Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Can you hear me well? Hello, Daniel and Curtis. Thanks for being here, guys. Yeah, let me know if you can hear me well, because sometimes that's a problem. I just want to make sure real quick. Can you hear me? Let me know in the chat. Okay, awesome. Sweet. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Arian, for animals and everybody. Thank you for being here. Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing this book. We're gonna I'm gonna give a summary, a very rich summary, because I really couldn't distill like very sparse like notes. It had to be a lot of notes. I have like 15 pages of notes, and usually I have like 9 or 7, so it's going to be a very long one. Just be prepared. I advise you to just it's probably what you already do, but watch it in multiple times. And I do think it's really good though to watch the whole thing, because it will be very rich. It's about the history of the movement in America specifically. So keep that in mind during the whole thing, obviously, because we're not doing the world's history, because that would be a book series, I think, I guess. And because me personally, I am in America, that's also why. Yes. No, sorry, Ben. I don't. It's not really my thing. I'm sorry, but I appreciate you wanting, because we've talked in the DMs about something he wants to talk about, but I honestly don't really like, for the reason I already told you about. I think it's a bit of a waste of time to have this debate, but it's I appreciate you asking. Anyways, and sorry about that. All right. So I have a few things I would like to say first. So yes, I took, obviously it's not gonna be how you call it, all inclusive of everything that's important in the book, because that's not possible. It's like 280 pages long, but some books you can get away with lesser notes, just because the concepts are a little bit more general and it's just less rich. But this was incredibly rich, this book. I had a really hard time of deciding what was important or not. So what I did is I chose the things that I thought were the most relevant, and the things also that I think need to be talked about more, because they might not be talked about enough. But when it comes to, because it is a book about the history, and also because these two authors are philosophy professors, they obviously included a very, I think, a very rich summary of the movement in the philosophy circles. And so, I mean, obviously, in terms of the academic philosophy of animal rights. And I've already touched on that a bunch in the last live. So, you know, yeah. Anyways, so when it comes to the history of it, I kept the events that I thought were very important, like turning points or things that were just really relevant. But there's plenty of things, like little events that they talk about that they think are important to mention, that I didn't mention because it's not possible. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah, I know Vegan Power Lab and George recently talked about this, but I'm against it. I think that's really bad, honestly. So I don't want to do that. I mean, I understand you want a private debate, but I'm not really interested in that, to be honest. Okay, so um, obviously I'm going to be paraphrasing and also quoting. I feel like maybe in the past I was a little bit too much into the quoting of the book. I still do that, but I try to minimize it, because I don't want copyright issues now that I'm trying to monetize my channel as well. So yeah, the book is not in chronological order, like in terms of the historical events. I tried to reorganize my notes so that it would be as much as possible in chronological order, because personally it confuses me that it's not, because the authors chose to organize their book in more of a theme way, like they're talking about specific movement inside the movement or something like that, and so they chose to do it non-chronologically. But yeah, so I tried to. Sorry if it's a bit confusing. And yeah, um So let's get into it. So, uh, the name is obviously the Animal Rights Movement in America, from compassion to respect. And just obviously, I mean, it's not necessarily obvious, but I really love this kind of subtitle or secondary title, like from compassion to respect, because it's really like it just demonstrates kind of like the shift from the humane movement to the animal rights movement. And they talk about it a bunch in the book. We'll talk about this anyways, but I really like that they did that. So it was published in 1994. So we don't have anything on the rest of the 90s, obviously, or the first 2 decades of the 2000s, which is something to keep in mind because that's like really like a lot of things have happened since then, but it's still interesting. But also, yeah, they have a different, obviously, perspective just because they were still in the early 90s or mid 90s. So yes, keep that in mind. But of course, they go back as far as the early 19th century. So yeah, and it kind of shows because that they were in the 90s still, because I feel like these were people that were really in the forefront in terms of like they were really aware of, I mean, all the main ideas obviously of the movement, but so much has happened since then that it shows in their messaging where they talk about that they didn't obviously talk about this because it was back then. But anyways, it's interesting. So yeah, the humane movement emerged at the end of the 19th century. So yeah, they say that it's in the late 70s, 1970s, that the animal rights movement emerged, which is interesting when you look back because it's in 1944 that they coined the word vegan in the UK. And so it started before, of course, but when they talk about the animal rights movement emerging, they talk about enough people being actually part of it. It's not like a few individuals, because there's always been a few individuals that thought that we shouldn't use other animals. I mean, probably. But this is really when it took some speed, I guess. So yeah, So we're talking about the first 2 decades of the movement, and just in this first 2 decades, they have a lot of things to talk about. Um, so yeah, they talk about how the animal rights movement is obviously, I mean, it's obvious to us. It's the logical continuation of the humane movement, but it's also very sharply different from it. The humane movement was promoting kindness, the prevention of cruelty, and compassion towards other animals. It doesn't challenge, I mean, I said was, but it's still doing that. It doesn't challenge the idea that it's okay to exploit or enslave, use other animals, when the animal rights movement really does. So, yeah, it's extremely different, but it is the humane movement is the ancestor, let's say, of the animal rights movement. Veganism also challenges human superiority to other animals in a big way. Greater and optional charity versus fairness, justice, equality, and rights. So yeah, basically the human movement is like, let's be compassionate. Let's do this thing that's virtuous. So it's not like an obligation to treat them humanely. Basically, it's like a virtue. So let's do that to be nice to them. Basically, it's not about the obligation to leave them alone and to not enslave them, kind of thing. So, in the 90s, philosophical ethicists began to concern themselves about the environment, peace, racism, and other issues like this. Basically, hippie time. And that translated in also academic circles. And by the way, I didn't mention, but I completely forgot. Hello, Carrie. Hello, everybody. I completely forgot to make a PowerPoint this time. It's completely optional. It doesn't really do anything. It's just for like a visual aid or something, but whatever. I have two little presentations I will show during, I mean, I have one that's about the content of the book, and then I have one that we'll be voting on. And I don't want you guys to be thinking really, because it would be sad if you think about what vegan books you'd like to um, recommend this time, because this time we're going to focus on psychology books, because I've been very okay, this is random to mention right now, but I wanted to get this out of the way. it's very important and crucial at this point. I feel the urgency of it as an outreacher, and I feel really bad I haven't done this yet. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for all you do for the animals, Lucy. Thank you so much, Carrie. Um, Let me change to this. I hate this thing. Okay, bubble. Yeah, it's just I hate this style of thing. Anyways, um, yes. So this time we're gonna focus on psychology books that are relevant to outreach and how to um, basically convince people, and just working on that because it's such a huge part of outreach and we don't talk about it enough. I know it's been talked about by especially Debug Your Brain has mentioned one of the books, by the way, that is part of it. And I think we need to focus on that way more because this is crucial. And it's like it's really part of the how, because I talk about like the what a lot, the content of the outreach a lot, like the messaging, and also about how to do it. But like this is huge, like the working with the psychology. And some of you, I'm not sure if the person is here right now, but told me about like how they should, like they're looking into the neurology or aspect or whatever, like something that has to do with psychology when it comes to outreach. And I thought that was yeah. So next 2 months we'll be reading about the psychology of how to persuade people and stuff. And so if you have any books you'd like to recommend about that, please think about it while I'm talking. You'll have hours to think about it. If you have any that you remember or whatever, we will vote on that today. So okay. Hey guys, by the way, let me know in the chat who read it. Obviously, you don't have to have read the book to comment on what I'm saying or anything like that. It's completely fine. Obviously, I just want to get this out of the way as well. But it would be interesting to know who read it and if you have thoughts about it. So, so yes, in the 60s, the philosophical ethicists, basically philosophers that deal with the morality of things, start being concerned about the environment, people, racism, other issues like that. And it might explain the emergence of the concern for other animals, but it can't be the only thing because that concern came later than many other issues. Yeah, makes sense. Yes. So in the 60s and 70s, it starts to be different when it comes to the dismissal of the argument for animal rights. It's no longer so easily dismissed as personal pro-animal sentiment, like sentimentality. And they talk about it at the end of the book again as well, this emotion thing. Anyway, so since the mid 1970s, animal liberation is now part of the philosophical curriculum of some colleges. It's very different from the older humane movement. So basically, like they it's so interesting to me. It's taken seriously when the humane movement in terms of like philosophy was not. That's very interesting to me. Like I mean, of course, there are some moral philosophers that have been talking about like treating other animals with some type of compassion, but it's not like its own class or something because it's so mild. It's interesting that it's recognized now, animal rights in colleges, which is probably why professors would invite people like Gary in their classes to give speeches. And I think that's fascinating because it's obviously like it is a political in the sense of we're trying to change society right now, and even the professor who's inviting us, if he's not vegan, like we're trying to convince him. Like it's a very practical stance. It's political in the sense of like we're trying to change society right now. And it's so strange to me because it's not like you're inviting um maybe they are, I guess. Yeah, they have like women's studies and stuff, I guess. But I don't know. To me, it's such a. I've always find it so weird that colleges do stuff like this. It's great that they do. It's confusing to me a little bit. Um, so the use of other animals was invisible to almost everyone, but it couldn't remain that way for several reasons. So one, the use of other animals has had increased tremendously in the 20th century through, like factory farming, especially in the food industry, things like that. Uh, and of course, just because there's more people here now, and yeah, people are richer in the West. So, second reason is animal use was also. I mean, when I say animal use, I mean non-human animal use, obviously, because I try to always say it, but sometimes I forget. So, I mean, it's not that I know you know what I mean. It's just that I think it's better to say it like that, messaging wise, because if you say animal use and you just refer to non-human animals, people kind of subconsciously like, yeah, because I'm not an animal, it's so. Animal use had also transformed in big ways. Yeah, basically factory farming, for example. Three, ironically, this expansion of animal usage came with serious challenges to its philosophical foundation. And it makes total sense when you think about it, because you're making the problem bigger, and so the problematic things about the problem, like about this thing, become easier to notice. Um, if the situation of the slavery of these beings is it becomes worse, it's obviously easier to see why it's messed up. Like if, for example, someone is suffering in their slavery, it becomes easier to see why that's messed up. And that's why I use footage in outreach, and why everybody should. So that wasn't the fact that it came with serious challenges, to the philosophical foundation. That wasn't out of a concern for other animals, though. The idea that humans are superior to other animals doesn't fit with the modern evolutionary theory. I love that so much. So basically, Darwin's theory, like we'll talk about him later. So we're just like, this is kind of an introduction to it, with the big lines, but we'll get back to it in detail later. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here, guys. Okay, hold on. Cool. Much of the disconnect that happens with animals seems to be that most disciples in the education sphere has a materialistic science view. Like you mean like mechanistic thing? Yeah, yeah, the Descartes way of talking about other animals. They talk about that obviously because that's part of the history of it. But yeah, definitely. Okay. Um, so dualism, something that would be good for you to remember as well. Dualism, meaning the body and mind are distinct and separate substances. So it's basically what you just talked about. Um, this is like something that historically was important in separating human animals from other animals, because only humans have a soul or mind, and that gives them their superiority. That's what they thought, and some people still think. Scientists and philosophers have discredited this as unscientific and philosophically indefensible. No longer a difference of kind, but of degree between humans and other animals. But most people, like how science like progresses, and then there's like a how you call it? Yeah, a lag in the time, like basically of it takes a time for the rest of society to catch up to what like science is discovered, and to see that as the new normal vision of the world. So yeah, dualism is a doctrine that the universe is under the dominion of two opposing principles, one of which is good and the other evil. It can also be a view of human beings as constituted of two irreducible elements, such as matter and spirit. And that really comes from the Greeks, I think. I mean, I'm sure actually. This idea of which is so weird. I always I'm like, like, I don't know the curriculum in the US or anywhere else, but in France, I had to study philosophy in high school, and it always seemed like very freaking weird, this idea of like the mind and the body is just like they're two elements, like the material is here, and then there's this other a realm of ideas, and it's not connected to each other really. I always found it very confusing. And then Daniel says, like, the world is a machine, not a living being we live in. That way, to justify animal use. Oh, well, that's completely different, you know? Like I don't know how it's called. People who kind of see Earth as a being in themselves that can be used against us as well. It's yeah, but yeah, like the Descartes way of seeing other animals. Yeah. So yes, there's been a loss of confidence in homocentric ethics, just like there was a loss of confidence in homocentric views of the world, like geocentrism, like the Earth is the center of the universe. When it comes to scientists and other academics, sorry about my accent, guys. Okay, so the animal rights movement seems different from other movements because it seems to have initially been animated by serious consideration of ideas by scholars. And I was thinking, did it though? Because Cross and Watson, I don't think they were scholars. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe it's because they were British and so they didn't talk too much about, like, they didn't consider, like, I don't understand because they coined the word in the 40s and I don't believe they were scholars. But yes, like mostly it was scholars who pushed it to the forefront, like Singer. I mean, I hate mentioning Singer as like a founder of the movement, but he was perceived that way, and we'll talk about it later in this. And Regan, of course, is a good example of that. So yes, they begin as well with an overview of non-human animal use today. So I obviously didn't go into the specifics because I'll talk about it later. I remember more writing stuff about this. So, animal agriculture is the most extensive use of non-human animals in the U.S. today. I mean, I would bet with the world. But it's really fish. Like 2.7 trillion fish are exported and murdered every single year. So I would say that's the biggest way. But you could argue that it's part of animal agriculture. I don't know. So treatment has worsened because of the intensification of the use. It's not like when we're talking about the treatment of the victims, it's not that it's the point of it. Of it's like it doesn't really have anything to do with the stance against like exporting them. You know, like if whether you're exporting them nicely or mildly or whatever, and or it's like horrific suffering on top of the exploitation or during the exploitation. We're not talking like this is not the point of veganism. It's not like welfareism or anything like that. But talking about it is important because it makes people connect with the victims of the exploitation, and it's also important because you're describing what the victims are living through. It's like like you know like when people describe what happened during the Second World War, for example, to the victims of extermination camps, it's it makes sense that you're describing the suffering, not that if they were, you know, imprisoned and then killed in a nice way, it would be okay, you know, like you know what I mean? Like you're describing historically the the experience of the victims in that sense. And I'm glad that they talk about the treatment, just like in the sense of because it's fine because they also talk about how uh like the animal rights movement is not about it being nicer, you know. So they make sure that people understand we're not about welfareism here, but I'm glad that they talk about it just because if it's a non-vegan reading the book, they can connect to the victims better in that sense. Just like with footage. If you're interested in footage for outreach, by the way, I have something in the description of this video and all videos. That's like the footage I use for outreach, and I use it because they include fish. And yes, it's mainly or only the food industry. So you have to mention afterwards that it's not only about like the food industry, but it's hard to find footage like with the people talking about what's happening. Maybe I should make my own thing. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, if you want some footage, it's in the description of my videos. Yeah, and also it's a book about the history of the movement, so it makes total sense to talk about the victims' experience and treatment. Yeah, it's not necessarily common. I feel like it's changing now. I can see it changing to hear activists talk about use instead of suffering. And this book was written in the 90s, so it's very refreshing and awesome that they put the focus on the use and they are clear about the treatment and stuff. I really enjoyed that. Um, yeah, the treatment of these, when they describe, what's going on. The treatment of these animals in the food system really reminds me of concentration camps, which intensive farms actually just are. Like they just are that. It's actually worse in the case of non-human animals because they are obviously mutilated and um, like we eat their flesh, things like that. Like they're forced to breed. I mean, they're literally raped, for example, in the dairy industry, bulls and cows, etc. We steal their secretions, things like that. Like it's really messed up. And small farms obviously are still slavery. Like I just have to mention it all the time because um so they are basically treated as objects. The production is maximized by doing quite literally the opposite of what is good for the animal slaves the majority of the time. Even if that wasn't the case though, it's still slavery. Like even if you like having backyard hens and you making sure that they have what they need and stuff and you still steal their secretions and they're still not free to go. Basically that's slavery. You know. So and I really like this quote from Gary Rofsky's speech when he says like if they're not slaves, what are they free? Yeah, I think it's a powerful one. Um Yeah, many animals die from just the conditions alone. For example, calves have a 10-15% mortality rate between 15 weeks. It was in the 90s. Um, and I wonder if it's still the case, but doesn't matter. I'm not sure. I mean, it matters to the victims. If you know what I mean. Like, doesn't make it better if it's not happening in terms of their exploitation. It's obviously reminiscent of concentration camps. There's so many parallels you can draw between the two, and I can't wait to read Eternal Treblinka about this. I cannot wait. Um, they also suffer from boredom, like human animals do, and often die of stress in the intensive conditions they are put in, and become aggressive or self-mutilate as humans do in similar conditions. Something that's interesting in the 90s between I mean every year in the 90s between 10 and 100 million non-human animals were experimented on in the US with obviously horrific treatment. Yeah, like that's interesting. The revelation of the facts of animal suffering on a massive scale is definitely a big factor for why the animal rights movement has emerged. Yeah, when people see the experience of the victims, it hits them hard, hopefully. But when they're not completely shut down, yeah. Okay. Everything about the movement is controversial, even its history. Some say it began with Singer's book Animal Liberation. I understand though, like this. I mean, it probably did in terms of the numbers of people being drawn to veganism that way, but he's not vegan and he's not really advocating for veganism in any way, shape, or form. He's advocating for utilitarianism, which is a very different thing. So it irritates me a lot. But, yeah, a lot of people obviously were drawn to the vegan movement because of his book. Some say it began with the hunt saboteurs in Britain in the 1960s. But like, yeah, like there's some truth to these two things, but like it began I mean, also like you have to consider like the forming of the word itself is a big beginning of it. Like I don't know, whatever. Uh, but like, yeah, these authors say it began I mean, there's been a way longer history of the animal rights movement than we think. Uh, you know, pardon my English. It began with the anti-vivisection and human movements of the 19th century. So, like, yeah, even if they are very different, the beginning of like the seeds of the animal rights movement begin in the humane movements and the anti-vivisection. I mean, it's not like the animal rights movement is not very different from the anti-vivisection movement, whatever. So yeah, if even if they are distinct and different, the animal rights movement and the humane movement have historical connections. So a concern for other animals has been voiced for centuries, from ancient Greece and at the very least, I mean, from ancient Greece at the very least. For example, we have philosophical vegetarians and such. Like I think Pythagoras was one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, there wasn't any political movement for animal rights before the 20th century. In the 19th century, Britain and after the Civil War in the US, welfarist organized efforts began to appear. So, okay, so we have some dates now where we're getting into the history like hard with dates. Okay. Um, Louis Guitos says, I've in personal touch with the creator of GuitosKids for a while. I notified him of this stream, so maybe he can catch this live. Awesome. Really cool. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so that was, I mean, it's gonna be no long while though. I just, you know. Um, so in 1824, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals is formed in the UK. In the beginning of the 20th century, similar organizations are founded in the US. So, like, a way later. Interesting. Um, diet was never a major issue in the mainstream humane movement, which is interesting. Vegetarianism was seen as impractical and extreme. Inevitably, some made the connection, though. That's just demonstrates that it's just so. It just reminds me of environmentalists. And for example, I was in the Sunrise Movement here, and even when just I'm not talking about veganism here, but that's an example that works well to explain what I'm talking about. Like they're like trying to make corporations do something different and stuff. And when you're like, that a plant-based diet is actually incredibly better for your personal footprint, and to just make things change. Like, it's so powerful to go plant-based for the environment, and they're like, no. It's like, I feel like the humane movement is very similar because you're trying to change corporations. I mean, it's similar in some ways. Like, you're trying to make others take responsibility in some sense, so that you feel better about what you're participating in, or whatever. But you're not really taking personal responsibility at all. Like, you're not going vegan, for example, which is like the way you would actually, even if you just focus on the suffering of other animals, which you shouldn't be, because that makes no sense. Like, even if you were just focused on the suffering of other animals, the way to make sure that this doesn't happen is to go vegan yourself. Not vegan, but go plant-based yourself, you know, or animal free in your whole life. I mean, so it reminds me of that. This is so good, like, to do these book clubs with you guys, because I would do this on my own anyways, but this makes me more active in the way of like I mean, it's great because we're all learning and stuff together, but I feel like having to do it in a certain amount of time and having to take notes makes me learn better. So that's I really love these things. The coffee is making me dry, so I'm not gonna drink it anymore. Okay. In 1802, an essay on abstinence on animal food as a moral duty was written by Joseph Ritson. In 1842, the word vegetarianism was coined in Britain. So, like, obviously, we have to just mention real quick why vegans don't align with vegetarianism in any way, shape, or form, because vegetarians still exploit and enslave other animals and use them as objects. But yeah, like it's so interesting. I did not know this at all. That the word vegetarian wasn't even in the English language before 1842. Are you kidding me? What the hell? What were they calling themselves? Because in historical books, when they talk about like the history of the animal movement, so meaning humane movement and animal rights in one, they refer to people in the past as vegetarians. But what were they calling themselves? I don't know. Was it even like a thought? I don't know. I just don't listen. Um, in 1847, the Vegetarian Society is founded in Britain. So, like, literally a century, almost exactly a century, like a few years, like, a few years, um, close to being a century between the foundation of the Vegetarian Society in the UK and the Vegan Society in the UK. Interesting. So Mohandas Gandhi was a big influence in inspiring vegetarianism in the 20th century. He became vegetarian after reading Henry Salt's Plea for Vegetarianism that was written in 1897. By the way, guys, so if you want to read a book from Henry Salt, I actually recorded one on LibriVox. It's obviously for free. And there's another, if you don't like my accent because it's too hard for you to understand or whatever it is, there's another person who recorded a book like that exact same book, which is the what is it? Um oh, it was a while ago I recorded it, but I'll just put a link to LibriVox because I really recommend either because this book is in the public domain, you can access it for free anywhere you want, just search it. Um but I really recommend reading it or listening to it, whatever you want, because it's considered to be the first animal rights book. I'm not kidding. So this is mine. So it's Animal Rights Considered in Relation to Social Progress by Henry Salt. It's not as I mean, it is a bit intersectional, but not as intersectional as you might think. And I just love this book. I mean, I'm not an intersectional vegan at all, but this is in the 1800s, guys. Like, you gotta. Um, but like he explains it as like not necessarily an intersectional thing. He actually talks about at the end how um, you should really focus on like we all allies. Like for example, the suffragette movement and the animal rights, for example, we are allies, but we don't have to participate in all the movements at once. Like we just have to see that we are allies. So yeah, this is the one I recorded and it's so good. It's so good. So yeah, remember if you want to listen to me, there's another person who recorded it on YouTube. So yeah, it's a great book. You should read it. Okay, so yes, that amazing guy Henry Salt literally made Mohandas Gandhi vegetarian. I mean, I know vegetarian is not really what we're talking about here, but you um, that's crazy to me. Because India has got a richer history of vegetarianism than the UK, but Mohandas Gandhi was like rejecting it because I think he was kind of rejecting his religion and stuff or whatever. In India, it was based on religious practices and some stuff like that. So the fact that human rights were in the air helped make concern for other animals more respectable. In 18, and I'm sorry about the dates going back and forth. I tried to organize it, but sometimes like I kind of forgot and then it didn't make sense to actually reorganize it because it was linked to each other. So it's a mess in the book. I wish they hadn't organized it like this. I found it, so Carrie says, I found it fascinating that maths and philosophy seemed to be once the same thing. Yeah, like mathematicians were also philosophers. It's very interesting. Um, they called vegetarians failed hunters. Yeah, I love that you're doing these still. It was Animal Personhood's idea to do um the book club. So I'm eternally grateful for you. And thank you so much for the advice on doing this. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot, and I'm becoming a better activist because of it. So thank you. um, Thanks for being here and watching. So in 1807, the human slave trade in Britain is abolished. And it was abolished in 1840 in its colonies, so like 35 years later. Um, some influential figures in the suffrage, women's suffrage, and abolitionist movements went on to help the welfarist movement for animals, which makes sense. Similarly, the modern animal rights movement emerged with the civil rights movement and modern women's rights movement. Um, the movements for the rights of other animals appear to wax and wane with movements for the rights of oppressed humans. It's more than just a historical coincidence that this happens. We should change that, shall we? Like, let's not wait for like the next time that we're like, oh wait, injustice is bad, because humans are suffering, and so we're relating more to the victims to actually do something about it. Let's just do something while we're not necessarily feeling like we relate to them. Also, something that happened was the Cartesian way of seeing other animals was replaced by Darwin's thought of continuity between species, obviously. So interesting. I don't remember who James Turner is. Yeah, he's like I think he's some kind of guy who's a historian or something like that. Should have wrote it down, but whatever. So James Turner says, quote, the defense of animals was indirectly a defense of nature and of man's emotional bonds with it. End quote. It in the end of he's talking about the end of the 19th century because people in the UK were moving to the cities, and so a certain type of human suffering was born in industrialization. So basically, for example, like the slums, child labor, factory work, unemployment. And he says that because of these things, it increased compassion for non-human animals. Of course, we've all heard about the displacement thesis, not necessarily with this name, but basically people saying that animal advocates misplace their concern for human suffering on animal suffering or exploitation. So then there's another thought, which is the extension thesis. Animal advocates tend to extend concern to other exploited or oppressed groups, which is much more accurate. They're usually vegans and vegan activists, etc., are more compassionate towards humans or oppressed humans, etc., because we are concerned about injustice in general and victimization in general. Louis says, emerged with is a bit strange wording since animal rights actually emerged aside from civil rights, but obviously there's a somewhat overlapping timeline. Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's what I mean when I say that at the same time. Um, yeah. So in the early 19th century, anti-animal cruelty laws started to appear in Britain. So this one is a big one. 1822 was the year that Morton's Act appeared in Britain. It's called an act to prevent the cruel and improper treatment of cattle. It's considered the first known piece of animal welfare legislation in the world, but really, I wrote down, but really it's not true, and I don't remember why. Oh yeah, it's because it's not true because we found out later that there was one somewhere else. You'll see. So in 1866, it was the founding of the ASPCA, which is the American Society for the Protection of. What is it? Hold on, I need to know what that stands for. Why didn't I write it? Um, American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Obviously, yeah. That's why I didn't write it because I thought it was obvious, but never mind. So in the 1870s, there was a mass awareness around the issue of vivisection, which I had no idea about any of this. I had no idea that it was so far back. And it's so strange to me that it was no, it's not super strange, I guess, because it's very obvious, like the intense suffering that happens with vivisection. So these authors did know a regular pattern. So when the human organizations move too slowly and conservatively, the more radical reformers that are part of these organizations split off from it, and they form their own societies that are more radical. So in 1876, the Cruelty to Animals Act. It's a welfarist act on vivisection in Britain, and it's considered to be a historic milestone. Um, by the First World War, the first wave of the animal rights movement was at an end, the anti-vivisection movement, basically. Um, Animal person who says Dexter Scott King, just 7 years old when his father was murdered, became vegan. Yeah, I know, right? It's freaking crazy. No one talks about this. Um, like literally, was it her name Coretta King? I think I'm not sure, but whatever. The wife of Martin Luther King Jr. and his son, yeah, are freaking vegan activists. I mean, I think they're dead, but whatever. They, I mean, what the hell, right? So you continue animal personhood. Dexter King's reason, quote, if you're violent to yourself by putting things into your body that violate its spirit, it will be difficult not to perpetuate that onto someone else. End quote. Yeah, well, so that's really human centric, but I think there's other quotes as well that they talk about like the value of it just for the animal victims. But yeah, it's so super powerful. But I always have a hard time like kind of checking if it's like a quote is true, so I'm a little worried about it. But I think yeah. And by the way, the next live I have one of the next lives, and there's gonna be less live streams. There's gonna be 2 live streams per month because I don't want to do a live stream every week. Like I feel like it's unnecessary. Um, but twice a month, something like that. So one like next month I will have a my first quote like vegan related um quote ranking live stream, which is me ranking the messaging of quotes because there's so many of them that are so good and so many of them that are so bad in terms of like how good the messaging or bad the messaging is. So we'll be talking about that, and that will be very fun and very interesting. Louis says technically one can be vegan while being for subjugating the bodily autonomy of pregnant women by being anti-choice. In the same way, one can be a race unjustified discrimination vegan. Yes, like you can be vegan and a horrible person in another way. Yeah, yeah. It's just that it tends to be the case that I mean, we have every type of person right in the movement, and every type of person that can be vegan. But it tends to be that the people that are especially vegan activists tend to care about other causes as well. Um, but yes. Oh, do you say like animal person who says, but fear prevented me? And yeah, every quote I found from his is human centric, maybe being audience aware. Okay, let's continue. It was so much fun to read about like the history of it, but to be honest, this book is so rich that at the end of it, literally I finished it yesterday night. Like I was procrastinating because the end of it is the philosophy of it, and I feel like it was repeating things, not in itself. This is an amazing book, by the way. There's nothing wrong with this book. I mean, I have some criticisms of it, but like because of the last book we reviewed, I mean, I reviewed like the month before. I knew a lot of what they were talking about, so I had a hard time finishing the book because of that. And it's so rich. Okay, yeah. So you remember when we talked about like Martin's Act in 1822 being considered the first piece of legislation, first animal welfare piece of legislation that ever happened? I don't know why that's a thing at all because we see that mostly thought that what. Yeah, okay. It's mostly, yeah, sorry. It's mostly thought that much of the origin of the US tradition of concern for other animals originally comes from the UK. It's true, but the first legislative effort to protect other animals in a welfarist fashion comes from Massachusetts in the US in 1641. 1641 about cruelty to animals. That blew my mind. Like what? 1641? Are you kidding? Because we all know the history, like what they did to Native Americans and stuff, and they still had a thing with the cruelty to other animals. Like you wouldn't believe that, right? Because if you're doing that to people that are looking more like you than other animals, it would make sense that it wouldn't happen in this order, kind of thing. But okay. The British and American Societies for the Prevention Against Cruelty Towards Animals, um, yeah, meaning basically they are the humane movement at this point, right? Disowned the anti-vivisection movement. So there was like these humane societies were like, no, we have nothing to do with the anti-vivisection movement. They are too extreme, kind of thing, because they were so conservative and still are conservative as hell. And so they don't want to be associated with the radical part of the movement, which like vegans or abolitionists. I mean, basically, yeah, it's just the same thing, basically, but whatever. Yeah, the American and British humane movement tended not to criticize institutionalized cruelty anymore because they were paid by rich and powerful people who were part of these industries. So useless. Okay. It's possible that the split between the anti-vivisection and the humane movements wouldn't have been so decisive if the anti-vivisection movement had been more successful in its earlier attempts. Apparently, in the US, especially, they were badly organized. They were politically inept and disagreed on too much. That's what the authors say. So they were very strong on that. I was like, okay, you're very strong on that. So they basically were really bad at what they were doing, apparently. But because of the conservatism of the humane movement, they would have gone their separate ways in the end, anyways. So basically, if you're successful, I'll go along with you. But if not, but in the end, they would have disowned them. So whatever. Okay, lots of energy was put on behalf of the humane movement to reform the transportation of cows headed to murder. But vegetarianism as the answer was very rarely entertained. It's so damn weird. So yeah, don't punch the cow, but you can slit their throat. That's fine. So what the hell are you talking about? What is this? Um, yeah, it's so very weird. Animal personhood says Goering also banned commercial animal trapping and imposed severe restrictions on hunting. He prohibited the boiling of lobsters and crabs. Who's Goering again? I don't know who that is. Is that a German? Like it just reminds me of the Second World War, but I'm not sure. If you can let me know. By 1907, every state in the Union had an anti-cruelty statute. In the 1950s, the American Society for the for the protection of the cruelty to other animals, whatever it stands for, you know what I mean, cooperated in the sale of pound animals to research labs. In 19, I'm sorry, by the way, if I'm laughing inappropriately. This is just dark humor. Um, to deal with things, with the anger. Okay, in 1958, the Humane Slaughter Act appeared in the US, because, like, at this point, we're talking about the US, because this is a history of the US. It just started in the UK. In 1959, it was the Wild Horses Act. Basically, it was prohibiting the poisoning of horses and burros, as well as the use of aircrafts to round them up for slaughter. Um, yeah, so they talk about how, like, the suffering and the cruelty will not go away if you do not address the cause of the suffering and the cruelty, which is the mindset that we have, that it's fine for us to exploit and enslave other animals for our benefit. So yeah, in the beginning of the 1960s, so it's the emergence of the animal rights movement, as we have said. Many attribute their own awakening to Singer's book Animal Liberation in the 1970s. In 1963 in Britain, the Hunt Saboteurs is formed. It's the first organization to speak openly and uncompromisingly of members as proponents of the rights of animals in the modern sense. It was a highly visible group, and its confrontational tactics of direct action were something pretty unique at that point. It represented a significant broadening of the animal movement to the working class. So in the past, it was really rich people who didn't really have to work and stuff, who were, you know, doing something for others, kind of thing. But, like, at that point, this was one of the first organizations that were for, you know, more everybody, kind of thing, which makes sense as well, because, like, in the 60s and stuff, you have, like, people had, like, there were more laws, you know, when it came to the hours you could work and stuff. Like, there was more protection for the workers, so they had more time to dedicate to others in that sense. So that makes sense to me. Okay. Okay. So in 1971, speciesism is coined by Richard Ryder. And I want to show you a slideshow that I should have showed you, like, I wanted to show you before in another live stream, but it's going to be a bit long, but it's really worth it. I really think it's important to talk about it right now. So, yeah, Lucy, what's the name of the book? I missed the beginning of the stream. It's this book, The Animal Rights Movement in America, From Compassion to Respect. It was written in 1994. Hello, Renzo, everybody. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm laughing at the absurdity. Yes. So, guys, all right, let's do this. So, this is a slideshow by David C. Arenas about speciesism. And this is very important to talk about because everybody's talking about the word speciesism. So, all right. So, I'm going to read it basically. So, a vague word is coined. In 1970, Richard Ryder coined the term speciesism and used it in a pamphlet with the intention of opposing experiments on animals, saying it makes no sense that other animals are excluded from the protections offered to humans just on the basis of species membership alone. However, Ryder didn't really define it, and it was Peter Singer who popularized the term in his book called Animal Liberation, a deceiving name for a book that promotes utilitarianism and welfarism. I agree. And defined it as a prejudice of attitude of bias in favor of the interests of members of one's own species and against those of members of other species. No way! Renzo is the creator of GuitosKids? I had no idea, Renzo. What the hell? I had no idea. That's so cool. All right. You love David Serenesky. Me too. Okay, so continuing. So the term was meant to draw an analogy with other prejudices like racism and sexism. However, since it was so imprecisely defined and the meaning is so vague, nobody can tell with certainty what can or cannot be considered speciesist. Neither writer nor singer are vegans. Dun dun dun. um, okay, yeah, hold on. Someone asked me, can you post the name of the book in the chat so I can screenshot it? It's very good. It's literally the title of the stream, though, I think. Right? See, the American rights movement in America. Hold on. If you want to just me to just show you, I'll just show you right now so you can take a screenshot. Can you even see it, or is it reversed? I don't know. But yeah, it's the animal rights movement in America. You should be able to see it just by Googling it. Okay, wait. Where's my thing? Wait. Okay. So that blah 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 blah. Okay. Neither writer nor singers are vegans. Isn't that telling? Words to defend the victims of any sort of oppression need a very precise meaning, otherwise they're useless, sometimes even counterproductive, as I will explain. Anti-vegan finger-pointing. The word speciesism is so vague that most well-known anti-vegans have used the hazy concept against what they understand as vegans. World-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, NDT, says that people who don't eat animals and use a no-kill trap to catch mice and release them into the wild doom the mice to be consumed by predators. He says it's best to let them live in the basement so they can stay there up to 6 years, utilitarian mindset from a non-vegan. NDT goes on to blame vegans for cutting up 50 trees to build a house, and the tree is home to birds and insects and fungus. Sentient fungus? And here comes the cherry on top. NDT says that vegans choose to kill plants instead of consuming milk and honey, which, according to him, ignorant about veganism as can be, don't involve any killing. The fact that vegans don't care about trees as much as animals is speciesist to him. Okay? I know he doesn't even understand that plants are not sentient and do not have interests. So even under Singer's definition of speciesism, that argument would not hold water. Renzo says, yes, I'm the creator of GuitosKids. Would love to receive your criticism. Well, thank you so much for your work, and we'll talk about it like in a while because it's gonna take forever to go through the book, but we will definitely review your work. So, all right. Continuing. So, is the term speciesism being instrumental to animal emancipation here, or adding to the confusion? I feel like I'm reading you a book to sleep. You never use the word speciesism. Well, animals with us, not for us. Well, same here. And I understand why people use it. Like, I'm not like saying, "Oh, you're stupid for using it." I'm definitely not. I totally understand. But this is very helpful. I think this post. I mean, all of David Serena's posts are really cool to me. So, all right, continuing. Then there's broadcaster Piers Morgan, who every single time he invites a vegan to his show brings up the bees. He implies that vegans are speciesist because by consuming almonds and avocados, vegans are killing the bees. Then we also have the viral video of Ted Nugent, whatever, the guitarist known for killing animals for fun, calling out vegans on Joe Rogan's podcast, quite an anti-vegan platform, for tofu-related deaths. Quote, every squirrel, every ground nesting gopher, every ground nesting bird, every snake, every turtle, every animal in that field that's turned into tofu is slaughtered by the gazillion. End quote. The tried crop deaths excuse. Well, we're not going to go into crop deaths right now, but you know the point, basically. So to recap, neither the guy who coined the term nor the one who popularized it are vegans. They're welfarists. Even the most anti-vegan people make use of the very same term against vegans. Therein lies the importance of very precise, well-defined terms with concrete meanings. Veganism is the rejection of animal exploitation. I would add to that by humans. Exploitation is the use of animals as a means to an end, as resources. Do vegans exploit animals? No. Are vegans speciesist? Maybe. Who knows? Depends on what you mean by that. So if a vague term enables all sorts of tu quoque fallacies, is it useful? Misrepresenting to politicize. If speciesism is unclear, just see what happens when someone adds the prefix anti to it, often with selfish intentions. Oh, let me just check that I didn't do 2 pages. Okay, yeah, okay, never mind, sorry. Wikipedia defines it as anti speciesism. Uncountable? I don't know what that means, whatever. Philosophy, ethics. An ethical stance which opposes the unjustified consideration or treatment of sentient individuals who are not classified as belonging to a certain species. What is unjustified consideration or treatment? Who can determine it? Non vegans as well? So people change veganism for anti speciesism, but the meaning of the term gets even more obscure and dubious. Pierre Sigler, a documentalist, former member of the editorial board of Les Cahiers Antispécistes, it's very hard for me to go from French to English, says that anti speciesism is political and a demand for justice, while veganism is not. What the hell? A quote from him: a demand for justice is of a fundamentally political nature. It is a request for legal, institutional, or social changes. An appeal to virtue is apolitical. It asks people to act more virtuously, to modify their individual behavior. End quote. I agree that veganism is apolitical, but it is not about moral virtues. It's about moral obligations, and as such, it demands justice. Sigler says that appealing to virtue, aka promoting veganism, can be effective on an individual level, but that only political and economic changes have had a visible impact. He ignores the fact that legal changes in free societies are a reflection of the moral progress within them. Laws against racism can never be sustainable in a racist society. The success and sustainability of the slavery abolitionist movement was only possible through small gradual changes in individual ethics. What does Sigler have in common with the aforementioned thinkers? He's not a vegan. What the fuck? It's so crazy. I mean, I've read this before, but like I don't really remember it super well, and it's just still hitting hard. How is veganism apolitical? I doubt there will ever be laws against using feathers or animal hair that fell on the ground. However, the deontological nature of veganism does indeed reject all animal use for human ends on principle, because the end purpose is that humans stop regarding other animals as resources. Animal emancipation. Veganism is about the animal ethics, and it cannot be enforced by law, but held and internalized by individuals. It's our moral duty, not a virtue, as moral agents, to question our perception of others and the actions that result from said perception. Anti speciesists call this mindset dogmatic. If it doesn't cause suffering, what's wrong with it? So Louis says that's such an important point about racism laws being not sustainable in a racist society. Yeah. Animals are here with us, not for us. This is a great post. Yeah. I stopped using speciesism when all the anti-vegans used the word against us. Yep, definitely. Okay, so continuing. Oh, it just triggers me. There's so many French people here that are being called out, and I'm like, why is my nation of birth so wrong? God damn it. Anyways, so Françoise Blanchon, co-founder of the French-speaking theoretical and activist magazine Les Cahiers Antispécistes, wow, in 1991, writes against what she calls vegan purity. Okay, quote, I am not strictly vegan, whatever that means. It would certainly be better in absolute terms if I changed the brand of margarine I use to one that does not contain whey, lactoserum. If I sold my woolen jumpers and so on. The animals who die every day in slaughterhouses do not care about how clean my hands are. End quote. And she gets even more utilitarian about vegan purity. Quote, honey is prohibited because it is an animal product, but sugar is acceptable aside from the issue mentioned above, despite the fact that insects are killed when cane is grown and harvested. A soy dessert colored using cochineal extracted from crushed insects is rejected, but we should not hesitate to drive miles to buy another more vegan brand. Insects crushed on the way do not count because they are not ingested. End quote. Either anti-speciesists do not understand veganism or they reject the concept, or even worse, both. This is not an overgeneralization. Let's keep on looking. And again, like I'm not saying that like we shouldn't improve like what like the environmental concerns. Like we should try not to we should try to diminish the accidents that are happening when insects are crushed and stuff like that. Of course, but that's not a vegan issue. Literally, veganism is only about using other animals as objects, like humans doing that. It's only about that. You can't make it about everything. Like every time an insect is killed, etc. It's like, oh, you're not vegan because I don't know, like for example, self-defense, or because you decided to eat something, and so in the process of you eating that thing, maybe there were pesticides and stuff, and that's really messed up. Like that, this is happening to these insects. Of course, that's not a vegan issue. That's very important. Because then it is just it's never ending, because then to be a vegan you actually have to live like on in an eco village and things like that, things we should do, but it's not a vegan thing. It has to be, it's like saying you're not feminist if you, I don't know, what could be actually a good example to explain this. Yes, so in industry, because like in construction industries, for example, okay, let me just express myself. In the industry of construction, there are always accidents that end in death. Does that mean that it's got human rights violations because of that? Like, does it mean that they are exploiting these people because they are accidental killings? No, that's a very different issue. It's an important issue to reduce the chance that this would happen to these poor people, but it doesn't mean that they are exploiting them or using them as objects. Like, it's not the same thing, you know? Okay, so let's keep on looking. Chastising moral patience. Jeff McMahon, American philosopher and writer. Oh, I don't like this. Okay. Talks about the ethical extinction of carnivores, apparently based on the writings of Oscar Horta, a Spanish philosopher, via sterilization, and is quoted as a reference in anti-speciesist papers. McMahon is a vegetarian, not a vegan, surprise, surprise, and both Horta and him are, guess what, utilitarians. Quote, one is to bring about the gradual extinction of some of or all predatory species, preferably through sterilization, and with the exception of the human species, which is capable of voluntarily ending its predatory behavior. End quote. McMahon also talks about benign carnivorism. Quote, imagine a version of benign carnivorism based on genetically modifying animals so that they would not only die in a healthy state of on a predictable schedule, but also enjoy longer lives than their unmodified counterparts. End quote. The problem with this for McMahon would be the price of this benign meat that would make it a luxury and it would be objectable in terms of equality for humans, of course. Humans are also a species. Last but not least, because I'm running out of space, we have the usurpers of the animal cause who want to make animal platforms about their own human cause. Jacqueline Guzman, director of campaigns in Argentina at Generation Vegan, writes, quote, anti-speciesism understands animals as oppressed political subjects that must be considered morally, since the species to which a being belongs is not a relevant characteristic when determining their interests. End quote. Seems like anti-speciesism is the same as veganism. The term political subjects is kind of distracting, but then, quote, veganism is an elitist movement without a class perspective. In its desire to be understood, veganism can even fail into biologicism, making use of metaphors or unfortunate comparisons between the political subjects of feminism and non-human animals, and even be offensive to those who have experienced situations of abuse. End quote. How freaking dare you? I don't mind being compared to a non-human animal. It might be an issue for speciesists, though. Who knows? After all, nobody can really determine what is and what isn't a speciesist. But I know one when I see one. Final thoughts. Anti-speciesism is a deceitful and obscure term that seems to have the purpose of not only undermining the moral imperative of veganism, but also including anything and everything the founders of veganism premeditatedly omitted from its definition so that veganism would be instrumental to animal emancipation. Vegetarianism, pragmatism, politics, far left mostly, but also anarchism, suffering based utilitarian calculations, sentientism. I'm not going to go into that right now, but whatever. Human intervention in predation, human causes, human health, environmentalism, sentient AIs, aliens, you name it. After all, we are all animals, a phrase mostly uttered for human convenience. Ironically, anti-speciesism rejects veganism as a moral baseline that deride it as a matter of personal purity or moral virtuosity instead of moral obligation. You know, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others. Most of the anti-species academic reference are not even vegan, just like some group of sorted televangelists who preach what they do not practice. Only that in this case, nobody bats an eye, they even get praised. It's all fine in the anti-speciesist world, as long as the victims are not human, of course. Of course. The most conniving way of sabotaging the movement is to pose as if you were part of it while eroding its whole foundation. Inside job. Yeah, there's something I wanted to say. Hmm. Yeah, the reason why the founders did not bring like killing and suffering and stuff like that was because the vegan cause, like, I mean, it's not only why, but like one of the reasons that the vegan movement, like its goal is possible, it's achievable as well. And you can't just, yeah, make one cause about everything because then it's not, and one, it's not possible, and then you're diluting your efforts and stuff like that. So yeah. Anyways, I wanted to show you guys this. Um, all right, let's continue now that we've addressed this, because this is also about the history, I guess. Okay, so okay, this is gonna be a fun one. In 1972, the Animal Liberation Front is in operation in Britain. So in June 19, I mean, it was in operation before it was founded as a legit actual organization that's not really like it's grassroots. So in June 1976, the ALF is founded by Ronnie Lee, a hunt saboteur. It was previously called the Band of Mercy. It is an international, leaderless, underground, decentralized political and social resistance movement that advocates and engages in nonviolence towards humans and other animals, illegal direct action to liberate individual animals in exploitation. They also obtain information and footage of the exploitation, and they damage the equipment and the property of the animal exploiters. It's a controversial organization even within the animal rights movement. The British ALF has gotten less support because of some violent tactics endangering lives, mistakes learned. The mistakes of the British ALF were learned by the US ALF, which is described as highly professional. When I say violence, like the ALF supports violence towards objects. There's debate over whether that's violence or not, but whatever. For the sake of clarity, I'm just going to say that the US ALF, especially, the ALF as an organization is non-violent towards humans. All animals, humans or non-human, but not towards objects, basically. Okay, so um, members of the ALF have served prison sentences. Um, Something that I didn't really know much about. Employees of these exporter facilities give regular access to ALF activists because of being disturbed by what they have witnessed there. So people on the inside are like, "This is so fucked up. I will help you." At the time of the book, no U.S. ALF raid had been known to have physically harmed any individual. Some have put people in danger though, but nothing happened. So I don't know because I didn't really search too much into that. But anyways, at the time of the book, um, the information obtained in ALF raids has played an important role in educating all of us in what happens in labs, especially laboratories. In 1966, the Laboratory Animal Welfare Act is passed. So the issue of animal research became the central focus of early animal rights protests in the US. It's very like parallel to like anti-vivisection. It's interesting. Hmm. Some see this issue of the like the experimentation on other animals as the central issue of the modern animal movement, like it was in the 19th century with the British and American anti-sectionists, which is weird to me because I feel like now, I mean, I feel like, yeah, a lot of people are against the experiment on other animals, but when you ask them, like, if it doesn't benefit humans to stop it, they kind of like, oh, wait, humans are more important. So I just don't, I feel like it's easier for someone to see why exploiting an animal for something that is perceived as, because I understand it better when someone is like, it's just as messed up, but if someone is like, well, everybody's gonna die kind of thing if we don't experiment on them, versus like, I don't want to give up my, breast milk from the cows kind of thing. I feel like I don't know, it's weird to me, whatever. In 1975, Animal Liberation comes out, a book by Peter Singer. In 1983, The Case for Animal Rights is out, a book by Tom Regan. Henry Spira was an inspiration to many activists in the 1970s, but I don't like him personally because of what I read about him in Rain Without Thunder by Gary Francione. He's very much a new welfarist. And a new welfarist, if you want to really dive deep into that, you can read Rain Without Thunder by Gary L. Francione. It's basically people who believe that their angle is, their angle is animal liberation, but to get there, we need to employ welfarist means. So bigger cages will lead to animal liberation. That's what they believe. That's new welfarism. So in 1980, PETA is founded by Ingrid Newkirk and Alex Pacheco. PETA is what does it stand for again? People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Okay. In On June 10th, 1990, 24,000 between 24,000 and 75,000 animal rights activists and sympathizers from hundreds of organizations, animal rights organizations from all over the US, marched in Washington, D.C. from the White House to the Capitol. It was a march for animal rights organized in part by Tom Regan and Peter Link. So that was interesting to me because it really sounds like the civil rights march that happened, you know. And yeah, thank you, Carrie. Okay, so they describe the types of organizations that we see in the U.S., which I really like that they did that. So the types of animal rights organizations, I think, not humane. Okay, so there are different types of organizations. There's the ones focusing on a single type of animal exploitation, um, which is something I'm not super for because like single issue campaigns don't really make sense. Because I feel like it's much less. I don't know. Like this is a whole different conversation. Let's not go deep in like random stuff. We are like one third through. Not even. That's interesting because it's been an hour and a half. Okay, never mind. Doesn't matter if it's long as long as it's good content. So and then there's organizations that are local, regional, national, and international. There's some connecting animal rights with other liberation causes, some with religious affiliations, some with a focus on particular tactics, legislation, distributing education, funding animal rights art, some focusing on specific animals, some focused on particular campaigns, some focused on providing alternatives to animal exploitation, some focused on showing connections between animal rights, health, and the environment, and some that are grassroots. And some, like, it can be several of these types together in one organization, but Okay, in the 1980s, many national organizations are created. PETA, Farm in Defense of Animals, etc. So since the 1980s, there has been a discussion about the best use of money in the animal movement. Grassroots or organizations. Some leaders of organizations were barely or not compensated at all, and some were highly compensated. My thoughts on that is that there's a problem with organizations in the sense that they are limited in their messaging because of the donations they receive from certain people. So yeah, I don't support organizations because of the messaging that they have. Is usually terrible, and also I don't like the fact that they spend a lot of money in advertising certain things or in um like newsletters and stuff, like things that I think are not very efficient. Um, so yeah, yeah. Also, they often are about single issue campaigns, which I'm against. Um, and it's complicated. Like they're usually not very transparent over like on where the money goes and stuff. So yeah. In Okay, we're going back in time because we're going to talk about specific organizations now. So we're going to talk about one organization at a time. So in 1883 was the founding of the American Anti-Vivisection Society. In 1967 was the year of the founding of Fund for Animals. Um, so these two organizations, the American Anti-Vivisection Society and the Fund for Animals, were two organizations. Um, there were two animal rights organizations before there was an animal rights movement. In the book, they talk about how it's thanks to the dynamic individuals that were their leaders and stuff. So they were basically ahead of their time. Uh, but they were a blend. They are a blend of animal rights and welfare. So the founder of The founder of Fun for Animals is Cleveland Amory, and it's so funny. Okay, get ready for this because it was so funny to me. Okay, so this guy announced in a Today show in 1983 the formation of the Hunters Hunt Club. So it was basically done to define the word conservation for the hunters the way they have always done for the animals. It's basically we're hunting the hunters for their own good. They were using, the words culling, trimming, harvesting, taking instead of murder. If we didn't harvest them, in no time there would be way too many of them hunters. And he says the hardest criticism against it that we've received was that they had no season for the hunting of the hunters. But he said it's not true. Also, the club's second rule forbids to take hunters within city limits, in parked cars, or in their dating season. So I thought that was really funny. Okay. In 1979, the Animal Legal Defense Fund is founded. In 1981, okay, this one. In 1981, is formed. It's a new welfarist organization. Basically, they believe in animal liberation, but to get there, doing welfarist things. FARM stands for Farm Animal Reform Movement. Then and now FARM is standing for Farm Animal Rights Movement. Interesting. Okay. It was founded. I believe it was founded by Alex Hershaft in the 80s. So according to Alex Hershaft in the 80s, demonstrations and civil disobedience's underlying message is that the participants undergo a certain level of discomfort for the purpose of publicly displaying the seriousness with which they regard that issue. I feel so seriously about this that I'm making a personal sacrifice, so pay attention. Okay, this is interesting. According to Ershaft, there are 4 stages of a campaign. This is from his seminar for activists called The Anatomy of a Successful Campaign. So, 4 stages of a campaign. First stage, alert the public to the issues and the opponents do not yet feel the pressure. The second step to that campaign is there is a discussion. It is important to maintain a high moral ground at this point. Press conferences are happening. The activists are in chambers, or within the chambers of decision makers, etc. The opponent takes it more seriously at this point and attempts to discredit the campaign. The active involvement of the opposition is a key indication of the second phase. This phase. The third stage of a campaign, according to him, is public acceptance. Public attitudes have changed, but behaviors and laws have not. Boycott, lobbying, and focus on lawmakers is especially important here. Opponents get more aggressive. Activists are now terrorists and appealing to the and so like actors are terrorists, and the opponent is also appealing to the public's fears. Activists become more complacent, but work is not finished. And the last and fourth step of stage of a campaign is reform. Effective legislation. The opposition will do almost anything to oppose activists, illegally or legally. There is a need to maintain cohesion between activists. So Ershaft says that in the 90s, and 80s, 90s, activists were still in the phase 1 of the movement, which is alerting the public to the issues, and opponents do not yet feel pressure. Okay, so in 1984 is the founding of the Last Chance for Animals. They use civil disobedience amongst other direct action tactics. It's from the long tradition of civil disobedience in many social movements, including the anti-human slavery movement. In 1985, Culture and Animals Foundation is founded by Tom Regan. Cultural re-examination of this is like for the cultural re-examination of the dominant view of other animals, and for the funding of artists depicting other animals' exploitation and suffering. I think that's really cool. An interesting way of doing activism. Can be very powerful, especially movies. 1986, the founding of Farm Sanctuary, a new welfarist organization. In 1988, Animal Emancipation is founded. In 1990, it is the founding of the Rutgers Animal Rights Law Clinic by Gary L. Francione. Um, it's both. It's about both advocacy and education. Obviously, I've inevitably left out a lot of important organizations because the book says like it's not possible to be, including everything that was important. But it really helps draw, like hearing about all these different organizations popping up, helps draw a picture of a diverse and ever evolving movement. So, they talk about how the demographics of the animal rights movement in the 1990s at the time of the book um, was a highly educated demographic in comparison with the overall population. Tom Regan, yeah, a quote from Tom Regan. So, the diversity of the movement with many hands on many oars is one of its strengths. And I can see that, but at the same time, I think some parts of the movement are undermining it. So, I don't agree fully with that. But I understand, like, yeah, diversity in general is good, but if we can all have the same goal and message only. So there were three major areas of activism in the 1980s. Campaigns against, like, fur, factory farms, and experimentation. So touching on that a bit. So when it comes to the battle against fur, there's been a lot of progress on this one, indeed. Public opinion is on our side more than ever. Of course, still is a problem with mink eyelashes, for example. Um, but that's why I hate issue campaigns because you have like one kind of battle one, but literally you could have just gone for veganism. It would have solved everything at once. Because the more vegans you have, the more you're good with that person. That person's good, Um, I just don't understand. I don't like it at all. It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, you got to deal with the root cause, not just like a random symptom here, but not this other symptoms. I just don't get it. Okay, when it comes to the fight against factory farming, I think it's terrible, so bad. Especially, it's so welfarist. It's so bad. It's so bad. Um, yeah, showing footage of factory farming is great to me. If you show also footage of small farms and stuff, like just showing the experience of the victims can be very powerful. But talking about it as factory farming is so dumb because people would be like, well, I'll go buy my humane flesh now and stuff. Like, it's so messed up. Um, when it comes to the fight against animal experimentation, the last legislation to abolish vivisection was in the 1920s. There are people opposed to animal experimentation that are against it, not because of the animal victims, but because of its inefficiency. Those people are not part of the animal rights movement, obviously, just like plant based people that are plant based for their health or the environment are not vegans. Single issue campaigns are exhausting, says animal person who, yeah. Yeah, guacamole, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so since 1983, every week of the 24th of April is the World Day for, during that week, there's a World Day for laboratory animals. And I want to share my screen real quick because this could be helpful to any of you. I don't know if you're interested in that stuff. I mean, again, I'm against single issue campaigns, but you could do vegan stuff on these days. And I was planning on doing stuff like that, but then I decided no, vegan outreach is the thing for me. So this is a cool document where see, I wrote down the days of the year relating to hold on, I'm not sure you can see it very well because I'm big here. So if you want to take a screenshot, if you're interested in that stuff and this could be interesting to you, there we go. And by the way, I don't agree. Sorry, I started being like an organizer for the National Animal Rights Day, but then I stopped because I thought their messaging was really not good. Even if I really like the format of their events and stuff and the intention. So yeah, there you go. If you want to take a screenshot, there we go. Leah says, "Stop saying factory farms drives me bonkers to the end. Factory farms in Sonoma County. Yes, on J campaign says, yes to small farms on that website. And there are lots of animal rights orgs supporting. It's disgusting. It's so dumb." I was okay. Animal person who says, "I was going to go to a fur protest today, but just demotivated. The drawback of not participating is that these organizations and groups seem to have the most numbers and energy." But yeah, there's no point though. Why support that? Like, there's no point. It doesn't. It just do vegan outreach or just do a vegan campaign or go there with the vegan placard, thing. There's no point. It's not because like there's a lot of momentum that you should add to it. It doesn't mean that it will add to the efficiency of it. Like, if the messaging is problematic in the first place, there's no point. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Jonathan Mitchell asks, "What do you think about slaughterhouse bans, the ballot initiative in Denver, Colorado, or the one in Oregon, which would effectively ban killing animals?" Well, I don't believe in it at all because people are not vegan, so there will be underground slaughterhouses. It doesn't deal with the root cause at all. This will be great when most people are vegan, but that will be a natural effect from making most people vegan. Like, it's not gonna help. They're still gonna kill them. They're still gonna use their bodies. It's just they're gonna do it underground, you know. Yeah, but it might be even worse in the sense of like the experience of the victims. Like, it might be even worse treatment. Um, I just don't think we should spend our energy doing that. It's such a huge opportunity cost. It's not good. I don't believe that doing anything is good. Like, yeah, doing like the form of activism, yes. Yeah, like if you want to do it something more art, or like a more artful type of activism, yes. But if the messaging is not there and if you're not dealing with the root cause, there's no point of what you're doing. Like, it's not gonna help. Like, I just I think it's a huge opportunity cost that we should be using this time and energy um, to actually address the vegan message. Like, just do vegan message. Yeah, I agree. Animal personhood cubes are great. Okay, let's continue. Oh, okay. Now they're talking about the profiles of the opposition. So they talk about three different, like, huge groups of the opposition to the animal rights movement. So the first one is the beef, dairy, and eggs councils, basically in charge of the propaganda, regarding health and their products, just like the tobacco industry before they were basically debunked. For example, paying for studies to show results in their favor, which happens so often. So be careful with studies to check their sources and stuff and the source of their financial support. Reaching teachers and children in schools, advertisements, obviously. And then a second one is hunting lobbies. This one is super important for me to learn about because I'm here. There's so many hunters. It's a freaking nightmare. But yes, so the hunting lobbies, federal and state agencies designed to manage and protect wilderness, are heavily pro hunting, as in many states, these agencies receive their financial support from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. Yep, everyone's corrupted. Hunters have long maintained that their activity is not only consistent with the principles of conservation, but actually is necessary to the health of the wilderness and its animal species. Excess numbers, etc., for like too many deer or stuff, um, for preservation of the species, etc. Yeah. Far from protecting the wilderness, these agencies spend large sums of taxpayer dollars to manipulate wilderness areas for the benefit of the hunters. To maximize game species such as deer and quail, they plant browse for deer, acquire winter deer parks, and breed and stock areas with species such as the pheasant, which are not even native to the US. I have to continue reading that page because it was really good. And also, like, there are deer farms, and then they dare say that, like, deer are overpopulating. No, they're farming them so that you can freaking murder them. Oh, okay, so gotta continue reading page 159 or 58. Let me just find it real fast. Yeah, I found the end of it. Cool. Okay. So, quote. Oh, okay. Mm, Fish and Wildlife bureaus in the United States spend only 3% of their funds on non-game animals. Yeah, they spent only 3% of their funds on non-game animals during 1978, for example. I mean, I know this is kind of old, but it literally still applies today. I have already searched about this. So yeah. For example, even though these species comprise 90% of the animals under their supervision, in 1988 they spent 90% of their funds on game species. The Fish and Wildlife Service is clearly serving the interests of the hunters, and the vast majority of the funds, 90%, come not from hunters, but from general tax revenues. We are paying for this shit. The wildlife that has increased, however, has been game species at the expense of many other endangered species. According to Jasper Carlton of the Biodiversity Legal Foundation, 3,000 to 6,000 species of vertebrates, invertebrates, and plants warrant listing under the Endangered Species Act, and the United States is losing species at a rate comparable to that of tropical Brazil. But the state and federal wildlife agencies have failed to formulate recovery plans and even list many species as endangered. These agencies are too busy promoting hunting and managing the hunts in order to ensure their own continued financial support. Repeatedly, Forest Service and fish and game agencies allow hunting even of species that are clearly endangered, such as the Florida black bear and panther. They do this because they want the revenue generated by hunting licenses. These agencies must also spend a good deal of time and money to ensure that more hunting licenses will be purchased in the future. Hunting has been on the decline in the United States, and this is unacceptable to the financial well being of these agencies. Their solution is to promote hunting. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit more. Just trying to find the end of it. Whatever, I'll figure it out. Okay. mm, okay. The manipulations of state and federal agencies at the behest of hunters keeps populations of deer artificially high in order to maintain the maximum sustainable yield for the hunters. Non-human predators such as coyotes and wolves that would compete with hunters for game species are also eliminated by these agencies, which only further upsets natural ecological balance. A textbook in wildlife management featuring a picture of a man aiming a high powered rifle from the cockpit of a helicopter states when coyotes or wolves are to be reduced for the benefit of wild ungulates. Aerial, air, aerial, aerial, whatever. Shooting is usually the technique of choice. Deer populations are artificially increased in various ways, including the clear cutting of forests, with resultant destruction of non-game habitat. Meanwhile, wildlife ecologists, sorry, oh man, and even those who promote hunting know that deer populations do not need to be managed through hunting. According to the standard reference work on the subject, white-tailed deer management and ecology, most wildlife biologists and managers can point to situations where deer populations have not been hunted, yet do not fluctuate greatly nor cause damage to vegetation. Certainly, deer reach overpopulation in some park situations, but the surprising thing is how many parks containing deer populations have no problem. You get the point. I can't find the end of it. But whatever. Whoa, hold on. I think this is important. Yeah, you would not be surprised, obviously, that the NRA is also um, part of the problem. But whatever, we get it. Okay. Hello. Thanks for being here. And one person who says I've heard something about how about hunters being some of the leaders in early leaders in environmentalism movements. I've heard of that too. Um, Such a joke when they're like in an environmental organization. Don't you understand that you're part of the problem as well? But no. Anyways. End of page 660. Hold on. I have a hard time finding this stuff. I guess I wanted myself to read the whole thing, so I guess it does matter, so I'm going to continue. Nevertheless, the pro hunting position of those who work for fish and game and other wilderness management agencies is perpetuated among those who will manage parks and wilderness in the future. Students of wildlife science at university are indoctrinated in classes into the wisdom of hunting. The hunting lobby has staunch supporters in every state legislature, in Congress, and in the White House. These lobbies assure that hunters will be allowed access to public parks and wilderness areas, and that programs promoting hunting and maximizing the number of living targets available for hunters will be funded. While the NRA claims to support conservation and wilderness, its official lobbying position is quite revealing. Quote, we believe that without some legitimate overriding environmental interests, then the NRA will support the expansion of designated wilderness only when hunting opportunities and access are preserved and the continuation of sound wildlife management practices are ensured, obviously. I mean, unquote, sorry. They want their guns. sold and stuff. In other words, the NRA is only for wilderness preservation when it will promote the special interest hunters have in living targets. In, in fact, hunters have in some cases joined the mining and timber industries in blocking wilderness areas from federal protection. For example, the NRA and the National Wildlife Fund, a pro hunter organization, despite the impression created by its name, joined the mining, oil, and timber industries in successfully blocking protection of 100 million acres of Alaskan lands under the Alaskan National Interest Conservation Act. Their opposition to protection was based on the fact that the plan to turn the area over to the National Park Service would have made the area off limits to hunting. As the previous example illustrates, the pro-hunting lobby often disguises itself in the form of organizations that claim to be focused on conservation, such as National Wildlife Fund. Many of its 4.5 million members are unaware of its pro-hunting bias and are non-hunters. Other such organizations include the Wilderness Society, the National Audubon Society, the Wildlife Conservation Fund of America, the Wildlife Legislation Fund. Well, I already said that. No, it's a bit different, whatever. And the Isaac Walton League. Even the World Wildlife Fund, which has been successful in stopping the poaching of endangered species around the world, endorses hunting in some situations. End quote. That was long. Guys, I need to take a little break to eat because I'm very hungry. Lol. Do the vegans have lobbies in every department like the hunters? I wish. Okay, guys, I'll be right back. I need to eat a little bit. Be back in like 5 minutes. Hey, I'm sorry it took a while. I was very hungry. So. Sorry. Yeah, I was hungry. It was 2 hours. So that's usually the mark for me. Okay. So yeah. So after talking, like while talking about the hunting situation, um something that gets to me a lot is the ego of humans thinking that they know better how to run ecosystems than ecosystems that have been forming for like millions of years or like thousands of years at least. I mean, it's probably a long time. So it's kind of astounding how humans really think they're like basically. Well, I mean, we're playing gods all the time, and also like uh, thinking that ecosystems have to stay a certain way or something. Like I get it. Like sometimes you need species to stay in the ecosystems or it will collapse or something like that. But also they evolve, so I don't know. Anyways, I'm not an expert. It's just it just shows like human supremacy that you think you can be the god to regulate the ecosystem and stuff. But yeah, never mind. When we really just destroy them, that's all we do. Anyways, the third type, or like the third profile of opposition that the animal rights movement gets is the biomedical establishment. Universities and private labs that promote animal research, government agencies, like, for example, the National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Mental Health, the American Psychological Association, agribusiness, of course. But that's like separate because it's not a biomedical establishment, but like, and also veterinary schools that fund animal research and support it. All of these are not friends. So, and I love like when people say, so non-human animals are similar enough for us to research on them, but not similar enough um, at the same time to actually matter morally in terms of like to be considered, their interest to be considered. Okay. I really like that quote. I'm not, it's not exactly what the quote is, but something like that basically. So, any social movement that successfully challenges the status quo and the vested interest of those in power will meet with resistance, obviously. Those challenged and what? Oh yeah, those challenged and also the government will try to infiltrate the movement and sabotage it. Quote, to the extent that the success of a movement for social reform can be measured by the strength of the resistance it faces, the animal rights movement has been successful, and the ALF has been uniquely successful. Um, yeah. So so basically the government and basically the industries that lobbied the government, they portray the ALF as a terrorist group, as we all know, and associate the rest of the movement with that, trying to alienate the public and the non ALF part of the movement from the ALF. It's easier to deal with this, like, it's easier to deal with the ALF if they don't have support from the rest of the movement and from the public, obviously. Um, when the radical part of the movement is isolated, it's easier to turn the rest of the movement from abolition to welfare, which is what they want. Because it's easy to turn like the welfare things, like it's easy for them to endorse welfare because they say, like, oh, we treat them right and stuff, and it's actually really good for their industries. They will literally promote themselves as humane industries. Yeah, Carrie, I'm lurking as I do my chores. I think this is like the right way, honestly, to do this because, like, when you do your chores, you're kind of bored, anyways, and you only have to listen to it. There's no real thing to look at, anyways. So it's what I do as well when I listen to stuff like that. Okay. Mm, thanks for being patient with me while eating, guys. I appreciate it. It was a while. It was more than 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So, quote, in response to the perceived threat of animal rights activism and the ALF in particular, the AMA, let me actually, I don't remember. I think it's like a medical organization, but it's what American Medical Association. Okay, so AMA stands for American Medical Association. The AMA developed and distributed to its members an action plan in June 1989. The plan is quite explicit in its goals. Quote, the defeat to defeat the animal rights movement, one has to peel away the outermost layers of support and isolate the hardcore activists from the general public and shrink the size of the sympathizers. This can be done by exploiting the differences that already exist over goals and tactics, especially the use of violence. The extreme goals and tactics of the hardcore activists must be exposed fully for the public to see. The hardcore types and the activists will not alter their views. They are dedicated. The sympathizers, however, are soft, and the general public is up for grabs. These people can be scared away if they come to see the violent tactics of the movement as dangerous and counterproductive. The animal activist movement must be shown to be not only anti science, but also A. responsible for violent and illegal acts that endanger life and property, and B. a threat to the public's freedom of choice. End quote. Yeah. Trying to find another quote. So I can't find. Oh. Yeah, I can't find the beginning of the freaking quote. Sorry, I can't read it. So annoying, but whatever. Yeah, obviously the media is on the side of non-vegans because most people are non-vegans. So, um, non-human animal exploiters don't want a public debate of the status quo. For example, the fur industry. They just prefer silence, and they don't want us to show the footage of it either. Ad hominems cause their argument. They just resort to ad hominems because their argument is a losing one. So, and they know it. um, so something that's really cool to know about is AGAG laws. The states that have passed AGAG laws are in chronological order: Iowa, Utah, Missouri, Idaho, Wyoming, and North Carolina. Basically, AGAG laws are laws to criminalize showing footage of what happens in the animal industries. Basically, whistleblowers, activists that go in there to try to expose it to the public. And yes, the first five of these states impose criminal penalties, while Carolina's is the first AGAG law in the nation to impose a civil sanction. Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit more about the ALF activists of the movement. So some of them, few of them. On October 31st, 1990, 37-year-old Henry Hatter was jailed for refusing to answer questions in a grand jury investigation about the ALF. He was placed in solitary confinement and kept in jail for 45 days. As a vegan, Hatter was unwilling to eat most prison food and was denied alternative food cooked by his friends and relatives. He lost nearly 20 pounds but maintained his silence. 20 pounds in 45 days. Another example. The most recent case of an activist being jailed for refusing to speak to the grand jury is that of 27-year-old Jonathan Paul. Paul's stay in jail is also the longest to date. Though not apparently a suspect in the case, he was subpoenaed in, which is, making them have to attend, I think, to testify or something. In November 1992, in connection with an investigation of a break-in at Washington State University in Pullman, after refusing to identify other activists from photos placed before him, Paul was found in contempt. Hoping to coerce him to testify, he was placed in the Spokane County Jail, where he remained for 5 months. He was finally released on April 9th, 1993, the court having concluded that he would never testify. End quote. It's freaking disgusting. Ah, yeah. There's like bunch of examples of people infiltrating the ALF, basically, so that they would yeah, expose some members and stuff, make them go to jail. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the philosophy kind of side of the book, the history of the philosophy of animal rights. Um, so they talk about these six major thinkers in the animal rights movement, and also about the criticism they got for their ideas. So first, let's talk about Peter Singer's animal liberation. So it had a profound influence on the movement. Lots of activists refer to it as a turning point in their thinking. So we've already talked about speciesism from my perspective and David Ciarina's perspective, but to Singer, speciesism. So Singer's quote: Singer sees the fundamental issue as a question of whether the interests of non-human animals should be considered similarly or differently from the way we consider human interests. End quote. They also have the capacity to suffer and feel joy. I mean, keep in mind this guy's not vegan. Okay, this is freaking crazy. If animal interests were considered seriously, this would mean the need for a liberation for them, analogous to that of black people and women. What are you doing then? What the hell is wrong with you? All those issues are happening because of discriminating against them, because of morally irrelevant traits when it comes to their treatment and opportunities or status. Sure, then go vegan, goddammit. Like, it's insane. Okay. Okay, I wrote something about my thoughts. So, yeah, that's good. Like taking an example when people when talking kind of like, okay, so when in outreach, when people say other animals and humans are different, we could say, well, yes, and for example, women and men are different, but not in the way that would matter to their treatment, equality of status, and opportunities. You know, can basically name the trait in a slightly different way. Okay. Uh, so yeah, they continue talking about Singer's view. So, equality of consideration is different to equality of treatment. For example, not okay, we don't give the right to vote to a 2-year-old human or a pig, for example. They don't have the same interests and capabilities as adult humans do, and it is relevant here. But we should consider their interests when we adult humans vote. Not all interests are equally compelling. For example, on a date, one person wants sex, the other not. Body sovereignty and the freedom to have sex or not for the one person who doesn't want to have sex is more important than the desire for sex that the other person wants. He doesn't say all animals, he says only the ones we know are sentient, but also doesn't give us a hard line for those we don't know, for the animals we don't know whether they are sentient or not, in terms of like the science today. Exactly, some insects they're not sure. But like, why would you not give them the benefit of the doubt? Like, what the hell? I love that vegan, of course, talked about like one day in his life he was talking about how oysters are animals and they have like eyes and a mouth, and I think I don't exactly remember, but I remember they had eyes and stuff. Just you don't perceive it, but that doesn't mean they don't have this system, you know. Like, so yeah, they are animals and they should not be used as objects. Um, there's a quote: "Actions that affect one who cannot suffer or enjoy cannot damage that individual's welfare." Yeah, because like you can kill a plant, you can damage a plant and stuff, but it doesn't mean that that plant has welfare necessarily because they're not sentient. I think that's what it means. Okay, so there's a quote I wanted to give. I'm very excited to read the psychological books, by the way. I think that will be very, very, very extremely important. And by the way, guys, you'll see that in a long time if that ever happens, because I have a lot of footage in stock, so I'm gonna go through that first. I'm thinking about incorporating costumes in my outreach. Like I talked about that with the Vegan Power Lab last week, to make it more interesting for people to stop, but also for the content, obviously, and something that's like not showing that it's about veganism, obviously. Uh, um, Rafaela says, so the animals are here with us, not for us. Says Rafaela says, if we believe we should not eat bivalves, then we should also not eat mushrooms. I don't eat mushrooms. I don't. They're not plants. They're not animals. I'm like, what the hell is that? I don't want fungus in my mouth. Thank you. But yeah, yeah. I understand it, but like, why wouldn't you give them the benefit of the doubt and just, you know, because, yeah, mushrooms are not animals, but we know that bivalves are animals. So why would you go for that? I think it's a little different between mushrooms and bivalves. Like, I wouldn't say it's the same. But I personally, I'm not saying it's not vegan to eat mushrooms, because it's not about eating plants being vegan. It's about leaving non human animals alone. But why take the risk? Like, why? I don't know what the hell they are. So I'd rather not. Thank you. So yes, I try to avoid them. I'm not super crazy about it because I don't know. So I don't know if I don't know. I am kind of a little bit confused about it as well. But good point. But I don't agree. Um. Okay. So there's a quote. Okay. Quote. Act utilitarians hold that among the alternative actions available to an agent, that alternative which is likely to provide the greatest balance of good over bad consequences is the morally correct one. End quote. Another quote. An experiment using a non human animal is justifiable only if the same experiment would be justifiable if performed on a human being at a similar or lesser level of mental ability, who had no prospect for mental development. End quote. So now the critique of Singer's position. I mean, I really summarized it a lot, of course, because I already have a lot of notes. But you know, other authors, like, it's so many books where they talk about him. There's like Gary Francione and Tom Regan talk a bunch about Singer. They criticize him a bunch. So if you're interested, check out their books. Um, I think in the last live stream we talked a little bit about Singer already. So if you're interested, go check that out. So a critique of Singer's position. First, when it comes to utilitarianism and killing, there is a quote. Okay. Quote. Generally speaking, there have been three kinds of objection to Singer's position. A. The concern that a hedonistic act utilitarian cannot find a sufficient foothold to explain the evil of death, either for humans or animals. B. The related concern that utilitarianism implies that there is nothing wrong with considering animal and possibly human lives replaceable. Keyword. And C. The concern that it sanctions a homocentric and thus speciesist view of the value of non human life. End quote. Okay. Because Singer basically says that it's worse to kill a human than a mouse because of the self awareness, capacity to plan for the future, and having meaningful relations with others. In his view, because I'm not saying that this is how mice freaking behave, I don't know enough about mice to talk about this, but literally, like, there's so many other animals that have all of these things: self awareness, capacity to plan for the future, having meaningful relations with others, because they're social species and stuff. So, yeah. he says like it's worse to kill a human than a mouse based on this. Um, okay, quote, can utilitarians focusing on pain and pleasure explain the wrongness of killing? End quote. Um, a killing that wouldn't involve suffering, that is. This is the problem with utilitarianism. All animals have more interest than just pleasure and freedom from suffering. For example, other interests are freedom, body sovereignty, for example, just that. This is very relevant to veganism, these interests. My way of going about it, focusing on the original definition. Um, what? Okay, yeah, I think I wrote that down so that I would go into that. Sorry about that. So yeah, I focus on the original definition, and so it's not like even on the killing aspect, because the problem with the killing aspect is that then you're stuck with like freaking pesticides on vegan, which is like no, like or like if you step on an ant kind of thing, it's not vegan, or if you have like a parasite and you kill them, it's not vegan. Like it's just a mess. And then you have to have like exceptions, like oh, it's self-defense and it's my food, so whatever. But like it's just easier to say like you don't use other animals, and so if you kill them to use them, or if you kill them for your benefit, for example like conservation, because you want to have a specific type of ecosystem and something, so whatever you want to um yeah, whatever, still using them for your benefit if you kill them for a certain goal like that. But uh I don't know, it's something worth talking about, but whatever. So I focus on the original definition because it's very simple, straight to the point, and it's so foolproof in so many ways compared to the other definitions out there. uh, um where was I? Yeah, when we kill them for our own selfish benefit, like even if it's for conservation, because we believe, like for example, like these deep ecologists who are like, I would kill these deer and these rabbits to preserve this one species of wildflowers. Like, okay, so that means you would kill humans to preserve the ecosystems because we are the worst parasite that's ever existed on earth. No. So yeah, you're just a human supremacist, but okay. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I got way uh distracted. Okay. Singer has accepted that a full account of what is wrong with killing cannot be based entirely on hedonistic utilitarianism. Okay. Utilitarian, that's another critique: utilitarianism, justice, and abolition. Actions that we might in general regard as immoral and unjust can be justified if they produce the best overall consequences, according to utilitarianism. Sacrificing one innocent person or non human animal to help find a cure for many, for example. In the past was black and Jews, and now it's still, I mean, it was also other animals, but still the case for them. Hello. Um, Veggie, who's Veggie Vegan Power Lab? Because I'm talking about deep ecologists saying that. Is that? I'm not sure. I know who you're talking about. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here, guys. Okay, Jonathan says, I think beings value their life in an abstract sense. You value your life tomorrow as much as you value your life in 5 minutes. So it's not enough to ensure someone doesn't suffer in the present. Yep. They have the same interests as us when it comes to surviving. I mean, we're all animals. Has Lucy been on break this whole time? I'm not sure I'm not sure what I understand what you mean. I was on break for like 10 minutes or something because I needed to eat. Human supremacy is morally responsible if you're the only existent sentient being alive. I'm not sure I understand that actually. Okay, let's continue. Okay, there's also empirical disagreements. People disagree on whether not exploiting other animals would be the best route in terms of utilitarianism. So you see, like it's just insane. Like some people don't even agree that being animal free basically and leaving other animals alone would be the best course of action for everybody. Like, give me a freaking break. Anyways, Tom Regan's The Case for Animal Rights marked a major advance in the philosophy of the animal rights movement. It's not referred to by many activists as Singer's book is, when really Regan's, and that's the book talking, these are the authors, they agree with me, when really Regan's conclusions are much more in accord with many activists' views than Singer's, which is insane. Yeah, there's been I did a critique of Singer's utilitarian stance in the last book club because Regan was talking about it and was very good with what he was talking about. How yeah, it doesn't work. For example, if you take slavery as an example, you can't take the interest of the slave owners as part of like your assessment of whether people should stay in bondage or not. Because what if there's more slave owners, or like the benefits that the slave owners would get are bigger in some sense than your assessment of the detriment to the slaves. What about that? Like, it's so messed up. It's just so messed up. So no, it's not relevant. It's so messed up. Tom Regan is my favorite. I love him. Okay. Um. So yeah, if you're interested in that, watch the last live stream. So the focus on suffering is problematic because there are forms of non-human animal slavery and exploitation that don't necessarily involve suffering, but they're still bondage and not freedom, and against the interests of these animals, interests that are not necessarily about suffering, but like freedom, body sovereignty, choice. Like if you have backyard hens, they can't leave. Like you literally have them trapped. That's just one interest that they have, for example, or like they might have an interest to eat their freaking eggs because I mean, they do actually. That's an interest that they have because they've been bred to over produce. I hate saying produce for that, but like, yeah, they overproduce eggs because they've been bred that way, and they actually have nutritional deficiencies that are really bad as well, like calcium and stuff, because of overproducing eggs, and then their freaking bones can um, become a problem and they can break and stuff. So they need to eat their own unfertilized eggs and stuff. So yeah, I need to replenish my water. I'll be right back. I don't need to put the thing on. I just need to take my water. Hello, thanks for being here, Mobius Maximus, and everybody. Louis says, because consenting to your own supremacy isn't oppressing anyone else in such a bizarre universe where you're the only existing sentient organism in life. Yeah, it's just such a weird point, man, Louis. It's funny. You sure? Yeah, in other words, supremacy is only wrong in relation to the existence of other sentient organisms. Could be oppressed, of course, yes. Thanks, Cyprian. Just, vegan gains. Oh yeah, well, vegan gays, of course, I would say that. No, but I understand it. I understand it. I'm just I just don't think it would do anything. I understand, like, it's like, okay, this is a triggering conversation for some people and stuff, and it's a dangerous one. Okay, I'm not condoning the murder of any person, okay? But when you say, like, people say, like, well, Nazis, when you look at the past, the resistance in the Second World War who were anti-Nazi resistance, they literally murdered them. Would you look at it back then and be like, "Oh, that's not justified"? Yeah, it is. Like Garowski talks about that, but like, what's that gonna do in our society right now? Like, everybody is like that. And also, like, if you are murdering someone else, you like, because they are, for example, murdering or saving someone else. I understand you're ending the symptom there, but like, it's not gonna end like the mindset necessarily. It's gonna pop up in other people, and also it's unjust because you're doing the same thing that you think is not okay and that you punish them for. So it's kind of a mess, but whatever. But I understand his I understand what he's thinking. It's understandable. But freaking dangerous as a vegan to say on your very popular platform. I think that's terrible. It's really in irresponsible. Yeah, yeah. Violence is a just tricky way of dealing with things. Apart from, if I mean, I honestly, personally think the LF is freaking rad, rad. I mean, the violence against objects, I have nothing against that because there's no problem. Like, yeah, oh, they're losing money, the oppressors are losing money, big freaking deal. So in that sense, like, because people say that it's violence, to me, it's not really violence, but I understand why you're calling it like that. And we talked about that in the last live stream. I'm not an ALF person myself. I don't want to risk prison. I think I can be more efficient in other ways, but I think they're really cool. So, yeah, like the fact that Singer is not even vegan and he's the a supposed leader of the movement, or at least influential, enrages me. So many people, so many other people, like Regan, for example, were infinitely better in their theory and everything, and they were vegan, and they should have been in that spotlight more than him. Gary Function is cool, but I have issues with him because I don't like his messaging these days at all. I really don't. I like what he said in the past more, but I prefer vegan. Vegan's thoughts. Okay. Um. Okay. I don't know why I wrote that, like, abolition view, whatever. But okay. When it comes to the mental complexity of other animals, there's scientific evidence proving it. A lot of it. If you want to look at some of that, a little bit of that, I have a lot of links in my description of all my videos. Uh, it's. I mean, even like if they weren't complex mentally, it wouldn't be like meaning that it's okay to exploit and enslave them. Just, like marginal cases, it's not okay to do that to someone um who doesn't have a rich mental life as a human, for example, or is like, mentally handicapped and stuff. But they do, like, the point is that humans have erased the richness and complexity of non-human animals' lives and experiences, and just taken their, like, these capabilities, like rationality, for example, only as one example, or like, yeah, like the capacity for love and freaking emotions and stuff and desires and and fears. They've taken that just for themselves when really it exists in so many species. It's just enraging. Yeah, it's disgusting. Okay, the Cartesian view of other animals contradicts the theory of evolution and our scientific understanding of the physiological basis of consciousness. So there is a quote on in 196. Okay. Quote, Regan cites diverse evidence, including the work of ethologist Donald Griffin, in showing how a naturalistic explanation of the emergence of consciousness and thought cannot restrict these mental processes to Homo sapiens. Thank you. Thank you. It triggers me so much when people are oh, we are the only rational ones. Like humans are so special in that sense. Like it's so freaking annoying. Um, Historically, animal welfare was about how to kill other animals painlessly and or with less pain, not about how we shouldn't kill them in the name of their welfare, like to use them. We shouldn't use them in the name of their welfare because animals, a quote, because animals have no concept of death and do not know what humans have in store for them, killing them will not hurt them. And okay, okay. Even which is not true, they freaking know what's going on because they try to freaking escape you. God damn it. Like, what do you need? So obviously they have a concept of what's coming for them and stuff. Very obvious, but even if they did not know what was coming, like human babies, they cannot conceptualize of the future. Does that mean it's okay to murder them and use them as objects for your benefit? Gross, right? Well, yeah. um. Okay. Regan argues that. Um. Okay. Regan argues that we can harm someone without them suffering. Quote. For example, a bright person turned into an imbecile by being put on painless injections of drugs is harmed even if they don't suffer. Um, because like they have other interests than freaking suffering. It's not the only interest. You have an interest of, I don't know, growth, freedom, etc., etc. Another example is a prison where all your needs are met, but you can't leave. So the need, like the interest to freedom, um, is not there. So you're harming them, obviously. But then you could argue that they are suffering because of it, I guess. Um, quote lower, page 200. Okay. Quote, the little old lady who feeds the cats may be kind, but by promoting the breeding of a colony of unhealthy feral cats, she may promote greater suffering than if she had done nothing at all, and thus do what is wrong. Our intention to do good does not in itself make her action correct. Second, kindness, like charity, is not something that anyone can be owed. It is kind to rescue homeless cats, dogs, or humans, but it is not one's duty to do so. Thus, the cruelty slash kindness view fails to tell us what we owe to animals, and reliance on it as foundation for our relations with animals leads to unhappy results. End quote. Of course, Regan argues that individuals have inherent value. We need to treat these individuals who have inherent value in ways that respect their inherent value. Okay. Let me check chat real quick. Yeah, Louis says Francione makes some excellent and some terrible arguments. I agree. Oh my god. Animal personhood says, and we've denied their generational knowledge since just about all child mammals learn from parents and elders. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Thanks, Louis. Ethologist is animal behaviorist. Thank you. Animal person who says, then we pretend like the other animals are stupid without comparing how abnormally generations of humans raised in in cages in concentration camp situation would behave in comparison to us. I am taking a screenshot of that. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but if I ever do anything with it, I will credit you, obviously. But it's very good, very very good. Yep. Okay, I have other quotes. It's very hard for me not to quote stuff. Uh, Quote, human beings in the United States have a legal right not to be used coercively in medicine as organ, bone marrow, or even blood donors. Even if many lives could be saved by coercing citizens into such activities, their basic rights not to participate in such activities must be respected. Similarly, Reagan's theory calls for an end to the use of animals in medical research, irrespective of the greater good for humans or animals such use might produce. It calls for an end to the raising and killing of animals for food, regardless of whether it could be done painlessly or whether it led to good or bad aggregate consequences. Reform of these institutions is not enough, given the rights view, any more than a reform of the institution of slavery would have been enough to give blacks their due. This is the full force of Reagan's categorical abolitionism, the duty to do away with institutions that violate the rights of individuals is fundamental, not contingent on the consequences of doing so. End quote. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know why they just solely focus on the food stuff and experimentation, but yeah, you get the point. So yes. So this is a quote. Yeah, a quote from Reagan. When we must decide to override the rights of the many or the rights of the few who are innocent, and when the harm faced by the few would make them worse off than any of the many would be if any other option were chosen, then we ought to override the rights of the many. End quote. I read that because I wanted to show that Reagan um, had like a he believed in some type of how you call it, threshold, uh, deontology, something like that. Yeah, and he's, like he says, this only applies to exceptions and should not be used to defend certain institutions like experimentation, for example. And he talks about like it's very specific scenarios, like if a dog and a human are both drowning, he would save the human not because of like the human being morally more like better, like just because they're human kind of thing, just because they are part of the human species, but because the human would actually lose more by not being safe than the dog, because the dog would live fewer years than the human and stuff. And it's like it's kind of a similar scenario to if you put a baby in a pond and an old lady in the pond and they're both drowning, who do you save? Well, you save the baby because they have more to lose kind of thing, that you're actually saving um, more because they have a longer potential life. And this is like a lose-lose scenario, but it is less bad kind of thing. So I understand that. Whatever, is it super relevant? I don't know. Yeah, for a more detailed account of Reagan's views, see the previous book club, Defending Animal Rights by Tom Regan, because he talks about this stuff a lot. So, next, someone I've never heard about, which is interesting. Maybe I have, but I don't remember. Steve Saponsi's approach. Steve Saponsis is an American philosopher. He basically thinks that humans are not superior to other animals. He says that using reason and rationality as the thing that makes us superior to other animals is unreasonable and inappropriate. Okay, so quote. Quote, the belief that rationality, I mean, it's not a quote from Saponsis, it's just about Saponsis from the book. The belief that rationality makes us superior might mean a number of things. It may mean that our superior ability to control and dominate by means of reason is what makes us superior. But if that is its meaning, then the suggestion is simply that we are justified in dominating others because we have the ability to do so. When put so bluntly, it is evident that this approach is nothing more than the might makes right philosophy we so rightly reject. Another interpretation is that our capacity to engage in reasoning is crucial to being a moral agent. But Saponses argues that even those who act merely from sentiment can be virtuous agents. Yet another interpretation might give us some hope in the accomplishments of genius, such as Einstein or Mozart, that surely only human rationality can produce and appreciate. But an overall assessment of the value of the rationality that produces and appreciates such genius must also look to its other consequences. For example, to the damage as well as the good we do to the environment we must live in. In the long run, the threat of human intelligence to all the species on this planet may be far greater than any contributions it has made. End quote. This is fire. This is so fire. Actually, I need to keep that as a quote. Um, it's really good. Quote, in his essay Utilitarianism, John Stuart Mill maintained that some forms of life are qualitatively superior to others. Quote, better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied, end quote. But this is a point of view that expresses rather than justifies human bias. We cannot enjoy the life of a pig, dog, or bird. As Mill pointed out, to evaluate competently the superiority of one form of experience over another, one must have had exposure to both. Not from the third freaking perspective, like person, but first person. Okay, continuing the quote. Thus, to pronounce human experience superior to that of a bird, dog, or pig in an unbiased way requires a judge who can experience all these forms of life, but there simply is no such person. As a result, the claim that humans derive moral superiority from this or that characteristic are methodologically flawed. End quote. Uh, it really, yeah, this really, I really liked it because yeah, it's also like just because we are valuing a certain type of life, it doesn't mean it's like the life for everybody. Like it's not because we value intelligence or we value I don't know, um art, stuff like this, that this is the and by the way, I'm not saying that only humans have intelligence and art, because literally like pigs like decorate their homes and stuff, and you could see that as interior design, which is art. Anyways, so yeah, it's not because we value these things and they don't have that we can just dismiss their experiences as unimportant and as like less than, because they're completely different than ours. Like if you're a city person, you can't just dismiss the life of someone who is like a country person because it's different to your life and you don't value it. What if they value it and they prefer it and they think it's got more meaning or something? Like, like it's completely freaking dumb. All right. He also says that even if we establish that humans are superior to other animals, we would have to examine the assumption to whether superiors are justified in routinely promoting their interests at the expense of inferiors. Yep. I need to keep it for a quote as well. Saponsis recognizes some non human animals as moral agents. Some animals aid others in distress. Literally, look at Instagram videos, you'll see examples of this. It's crazy and beautiful. And by the way, I think these are very good to share. Like any video that personalizes other animals, like make them restoring them to subjects and not objects, is very powerful and helpful to them. And the people love this stuff too, so they will watch it. Some animals defend their young and warn others of impending danger. People deny. Um, Yeah, people deny that they are moral agents by saying that they don't slash can't philosophically align with virtues and or morality. So Ponces argues that the ability to conceptualize morality is not necessary, as someone doing a heroic act out of instinct to save a baby in a burning building, for example, might not be able to explain the reason why they did that, for example, if they're mentally handicapped or whatever, but they have carried out a moral slash heroic action nonetheless. We have this hard line between human animals and other animals when it comes to instinct, and it drives me completely freaking insane. That humans, like, it's like humans aren't blindly following instinct when other animals are, basically. Studies show that other animals aren't necessarily doing that. That they are rational as well. They make decisions based on what they've learned and stuff, and they teach each other stuff. And humans definitely are moved by instinct way more than most people might think, obviously, like just passion crimes and stuff. Just like, for example, the parental instincts of caring for your baby, that's an instinct. That doesn't diminish it, though, just because it's an instinct, you know? But you know, we do that. We do that for other animals when we don't do that for human mothers. It's so weird. We don't say like to mothers like, oh, it's, you know, it's because of so many years of evolutionary evolution, because people have evolved to care for their babies more than they haven't, you know, like it's more people, there's more people who have an instincts towards their children than there are people who don't, because the people who did have an instinct to protect their children stayed alive more, like had their progeny survive more than the other people. That makes sense. So there's more of these people. Um, and yeah, like if you want just to see even if that's true, like that people move more by instinct, like just looking at sociology, psychology and stuff, like people are not unique make your own destiny kind of beings. Like they also are, like, we are systems as well. Like we have blueprints and stuff, like just like other animals. uh, Groupthink also situations are very good examples to demonstrate that. um yeah, Saponsis and Regan agree on the sacrifice of the interests of other animals if humans' interests would be sacrificed too in the same situation. Then there's this quote. Okay, a long quote. Quote, morality includes at least two kinds of principles. Ordinary principles give us a sense of the major features of the terrain. They establish what is valuable, what interests deserve how much protection, and so forth. Auxiliary principles are invoked to settle conflicts and deal with emergency situations unresolved by ordinary principles. By the way, this is Saponsis, obviously. So back to the quote. For example, the principle that we should help those in distress establishes a broad value but says nothing about how to choose when only some of those in distress can be helped. For that, we must invoke auxiliary principles, such as to protect the weakest, the innocent, those to whom we have special obligations, for example, our children, or those who make the greatest contribution to society. We saw an example of an auxiliary principle in Regan's Warsaw Principle. Thus, priority principles, principles determining how to set priorities where rights or interests come into conflict, are one type of auxiliary principle. By the way, like the example was like basically the same thing, like in a pond, like a dog or a human kind of thing. The question that arises when we recognize both ordinary and auxiliary principles is how they relate. Sometimes people argue as if we were able to infer that what ordinary principles we should be committed to from a knowledge of the auxiliary principles we accept. Let me reread this. Okay. Sometimes people argue as if we were able to infer what ordinary principles we should be committed to from a knowledge of the auxiliary principles we accept. So basically, people are like, we should like see what we would do in an urgent emergency situation and then see what's right from that in all situations, something like that. But this would be a mistake. Suppose we believe that we should always help those who are weaker in preference to those who are stronger, on the assumption that the stronger are less in need of assistance and more likely to survive even when the strong have less of a right to life than the weak. I skipped a line, sorry. Okay, suppose we believe that we should always help those who are weaker in preference to those who are stronger, on the assumption that the stronger are less in need of assistance or more likely to survive even when they do. Surely we cannot infer from this auxiliary principle that the strong have less of a right to life than the weak, and that consequently it would be acceptable to sacrifice their lives for the less pressing interests of the weaker. Thus, we cannot legitimately infer from auxiliary principles what ordinary principles should be. This point is relevant to the question of animal liberation because the belief that animal liberation means we must give equal priority to animals is based on the assumption that our choice of auxiliary principles dictates the ordinary principles we should accept. But as we have just seen, such an inference is unsound. Thus, recognizing that human life ought to be preserved in preference to animal life in many, though not necessarily all situations, where conflict arises will not justify us in routinely and avoidably sacrificing animals' most basic interests where no serious conflict exists. Deciding to save the life of a human infant rather than that of a calf, if we were forced to choose between them, tells us nothing about the acceptability of keeping calves in tiny veil crates and on liquid diets in anticipation of killing and eating them. End quote. Yeah, but to me, like the reason is because they have more of a lifespan, like the human infant. But like that's a really like niche, not niche, yeah, like a very specific exception. Yeah. Uh, Jonathan says moral reasoning is basically making rules to explain moral intuitions. Moral intuitions are the root, and animals certainly have them too. Yeah, and social that's a social species trait, like morality. That's how to live in a social group kind of thing, in a way that works for the survival of the group and stuff. Yeah. Okay. We have like 3 pages of notes left, guys. It's been a while, I think. Yeah, 3 hours. Okay, so. Oh, yeah. I actually already mentioned this, but I'm going to read it anyways. So I've had very fiery arguments slash conversations with my husband about like something similar to what he was talking about. And I still don't really know exactly. I think I do, but I'm not exactly sure. It sounds like human supremacy, like sometimes. But at the same time, I understand if you choose to save the animal from the species who is going to live longer than the other one. Blah, blah, blah. Already talked about this. But yeah, but once people talk, I hate that. When that's the reason, once people talk about the richness of the human's life versus the richness of the non-human's life, the non-human animal's life, as the reason, like that is the perceived richness of their life through your lens, as the reason for saving the human and not the non-human animal, I have serious issues with that because it's extremely human-centric to think our experience is more special when we really have no idea of the richness of their lives and experience. Maybe they have an incredible sense of community in social species and way like in a way that's functional, not like ours. We're very dysfunctional socially. Maybe they have like a freaking meditative sense or whatever, and their life is so much more peaceful in some sense. I don't know. They are obviously all more harmonious than us to other species, and so maybe there is a happiness that comes from that. Who freaking knows? Maybe they have an easier sense of joy, like human children. Who knows? It's so misplaced to compare these two experiences and judge them from the outside when really, yeah, we are judging them from the outside. We're not even objective in the situation, looking at two different species and having objective criteria to judge them, like in the experience. We are one of these species looking at the other one. It's like, oh, your experience is crap because it's not like mine. It's really stupid. Um, yeah, it reminds me of the human supremacist idea that other animals cannot be rational or think, and it's disgusting and it's untrue. A different, more simple life doesn't necessarily mean a less, like a poorer life or a less rich one. Even if it might be less complex in some sense, it doesn't mean it's not as good or not even better. We have no clue. That's what I'm getting at. Like it annoys me to no end. Okay. Okay, there's a quote. Oh, there's a new philosopher. Did I skip something? Yes, I did. Okay. Whoa, I skipped a lot. Okay, there's a quote that I actually published. Was it today or yesterday? I don't know, but I published a part of that quote because it was good. I'm getting a bunch of quotes from these books. It's really cool. Okay, quote from Saponses. Animals are the most extensively and thoroughly exploited group on Earth. Consequently, liberating animals would have the largest impact on our lives of any moral reform movement to date. End quote. And yeah, the problem is that he's definitely utilitarian in the sense that he isn't against non-human animal use, so he's basically not vegan. He might be plant-based, I don't know, but or living an animal-free life, I don't know, but probably not. He isn't against non-human animal use by humans when it comes to backyard hens or using their flesh if they've died a natural death. He's basically a welfarist in that sense, a utilitarian. And it's frustrating. The people in the book kind of are seeming to agree with him, which is a little messed up. Because like I've already talked about it in other live streams and stuff. I don't think I need to repeat myself. Like I don't want to go into everything super deeply, anyways. But okay, quote. It is commonly thought that the condition is inapplicable to animals, as they surely cannot give or withhold consent from something they cannot understand. But Saponsis argues to the contrary, that animals can, in a perfectly straightforward way, give and withhold consent. The struggle of animals to escape and the need to incapacitate and restrain them reveal that the subjects do not give that consent. Of course, they may not understand the experiment, but neither must a human subject who contemplates participation. The consent requirement is intended to protect subjects from unwanted interference, whether or not they understand the experiment. End quote. He would also like, I don't think it's the same thing because, like, the humans have like, I mean, uh, like humans, even if they don't understand the experiment, they understand the broader context of it. Um, Already, how could they consent to it if they don't understand the experiment? I mean, they can't. They understand the broader strokes of it, like they understand the context. The animals, they only know they are being restricted and they are in danger. They know that this is not right. Something's off, and they don't feel safe. But they cannot consent because they don't know the like through communication. They don't understand, and even might be also their level of like their capability to understand what's going on. But like it's too much of a complex situation for us to even communicate to them because we don't have the language. Like they don't understand that this is for what reason or whatever. They cannot consent. Like they can't. Even if they can't consent to being restrained or not, sure. But like it's not informed consent. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, whatever. So, in Animal Rights and Human Morality, Bernard Rollin argues that any moral theory we apply to humans must be applicable to other animals. He ties moral theory to the scientific investigation of other animals. According to him, the interests of a being are determined by his telos, his nature as to what is genetically determined. The beings that have a drive to fulfill their telos and also are in some sense aware of their struggle should be the objects of moral concern. There's a quote. Quote, Rollin agrees that we can see that animals are morally considerable by reflecting on what makes our own lives valuable. He does not hold the elements of human cognition, such as rationality, to be paradigmatic of what makes a life valuable. Thank you. Thus, Rollin's approach is closer to Saponsi's formulation in avoiding a homocentric weighing of interests. Furthermore, Rollin cautions that our assumptions about animals' interests must not be modeled on faulty comparisons with ourselves, but must be determined empirically. We must not assume, for example, that because a sheep will eat shortly after surgery, that this animal is not suffering pain and stress. End quote. Yeah. It's not the exact. Yeah, never mind. It's not the end of the quote. Humans do not respond in this way, but such behavior is an adaptive response to stress in sheep. End quote. Yeah. Okay. Rollin thinks the sort of rights other animals should have should change with the information we obtain about their interests. But why? I just don't understand. Like this seems welfare, because why can't we just leave them alone and then we're set? Like um Yeah, I'm not gonna go into the objections to Roland's views that much because I don't find it super important to mention. And it's getting along this live. And yeah, like, get the book if you're interested in reading about that, in reading and not rolling. So, in Created from Animals: The Moral Implications of Darwinism, John's, John's, James Rachels talks about how Darwin's evolutionary theory is to be taken seriously by moral theorists because it challenges the view that humans are categorically different from other animals. What I don't understand is why in his title he says created from animals when we are animals. But never mind, okay. Traditional morality is based on the assumption that these two, humans and non human animals, are categorically different. Quote Darwinian biology gives primacy to individuals in all their diversity over the old notion of species. Rachels suggests that we ought to do the same, adopting what he calls moral individualism, the view that how an individual may be treated is determined not by group memberships but by consideration of her own particular characteristics. Given that humans and animals are not simply different, but that there is a complex pattern of similarities and differences, morality should respect this complexity. Insofar as two individuals, regardless of their species, are similar, they should be treated similarly, while to the extent that they are different, they should be treated differently. Rachels points out that moral individualism is more plausible in many respects than speciesism. For example, chimpanzees do not normally read, write, or discuss morality, but if one appeared who did, the fact that normal chimps do not would be no rational basis for excluding this reading chimp from attending college classes and for electing instead to perform invasive research on her. End quote. Yep. I actually did talk about this later, Mobius Maximus. It shouldn't matter if anyone is capable of having moral consideration for someone to give moral consideration to them. It is solely the responsibility of the one acting in a moral capacity. Absolutely agree. And they talk about this. Yeah. Okay. So, moving on, Andrew Lindsay talks about the moral status of non human animals in Christianity. He talks about dominion, meaning despotism, versus the stewardship of other animals. Does it mean like we have dominion over other animals? Okay, so does that mean despotism or stewardship? He talks about how inflicting injury on other animals is wrong. So, yeah, it's not super animal rights, but okay. Oh, okay, so we're getting to the end of this. Mary Midgley argues that the way we're talking about morality and animal rights is the wrong way to talk about it. Also, that reason and emotion can't be separated so easily. I agree. That they are intertwined. She talks about how using the term rights is not helpful, as it is only helpful in the context of law but not philosophy. That is an obscure term. I agree. To some degree, I do. Yeah, well, like, it's not even necessary to say rights, but I get it. This is fun. I hope you guys are having fun. Like, I think this is very helpful to make us stronger as activists. Like, I think we should all educate ourselves throughout our lives about this stuff to become better. Trying to find a quote real quick. This is annoying. Oh, wrong thing. Never mind. It's my fault. Okay, cool. It was hard to find. Quote: Midgley sees similar problems with the concept of equality, which she sees, along with the concept of natural rights, as having no built in limits, being essentially tools for widening concern. As such, these concepts require supplementation by more detailed and discriminating ideas. At the same time, equality is in practice in-group concept, as an in-group concept, a tool for rectifying injustice within a group, not for widening that group. This is because, from a political point of view, it is too difficult both to defend equality within a particular group and to seek and extend the boundaries of that group. Accordingly, the eliminated circle of individuals who are to be treated equally are always surrounded by the outer darkness of those who are ignored. The Greeks argued egalitarianism in a society that kept slaves and regarded women with disdain. Jean Jacques Rousseau, who championed the rights of men, denied entirely the rights of women. End quote. Yeah, meh. I don't know. I don't know that's such a problem because it just widens. I don't know. I don't know. I thought I'd mention it. The authors of this book say that the diversity in thought when it comes to animal rights is a strength for the movement, but I'm not sure I agree. Yes, it's very important that we explore all these thoughts and theories and stuff, but honestly, many of them are dangerous to the animal victims. So I don't know. Okay, conservationism is a human supremacist view of environmentalism, preserving some wilderness for present or future humans to enjoy it, but sometimes destroying it for human benefit when it's the case. For example, hunters. It reminds me of the environmental group I was in. It was like all about preserving the wilderness and preserving like the environment so that I can have children and I can feel good about what I did to help my children enjoy life and stuff. Like it's so and it's fine to have this like desire of course, but it should also be accompanied by a caring of other species. And I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't I mean, I know it wasn't the case because they weren't even plant-based. They weren't even like some of them were hunters and stuff. Like they're not even plant-based or living animal free, so you don't care about other individuals. You only care about species staying good so that you can feel safe in the future and you can have your human life and stuff. Like it's annoying. Interesting, Mobius Maximus. I take issue with the word rights being used as an entitlement. Why? You mean, oh, I think I understand. You mean like maybe the right to have something that, like, I mean, really I'm talking about negative rights more than anything, like maybe the right to not have to work or something, like it's so dumb, but like something like that. Maybe you're talking about like the right to be given something without working for it. Maybe you're talking about, I don't know. I'm talking about negative rights when I talk about rights, um, which means like the right to not be done something to you. Um, I'm glad, animal personhood. Yes, I am enjoying this. It recently struck me that I know very little on animal rights movement history, so this is very timely. Thanks, Lucy. Thank you for being here and learning with me. Interesting. Rights come from someone, not to them. I don't know. I don't know. I think this is not super important to talk about, to be honest. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, I know, right? Animal personhood, yes. Staunchly non-vegan environmentalist, confuse and irk me. Extension Rebellion meetup. They had cheese and other animal space pizza. Same with Sunrise. It's a freaking nightmare. I left. I was like, I'm done with you guys. Like, it's a joke. Okay, so I keep writing the wrong freaking page. It's annoying. Quote: the focus of animal rights arguments has been to show that animals who are sentient ought to be given the sort of morally serious consideration that human beings are given, not to argue that animals are the only individuals other than humans who should count. Animal rights proponents such as Regan leave open the task of arguing for the moral considerability of the environment and other sorts of individuals. End quotes. Yeah. Yep. I'm gonna keep that. I mean, I'm not gonna quote the end of that because I don't want people to be like, "Oh, the Earth is an individual, so it doesn't mean anything to be in whatever." It's fucking stupid, but still. I'm gonna. Okay, so at the end of the book, they're running in the problem of the right to life. When they could just stick to the original definition of veganism, it would encompass the times where, like I've talked about earlier, when humans kill other animals for their own benefit. It fits the definition of exploitation to use them for your own selfish benefits. So you kill them to use them. You're using them, like, or you're killing them because you're using um them to, I don't know, regulate the environment, whatever the hell. Okay, so yeah, there's a segment about deep ecology, but we literally went into that in the last live stream. So because Regan was also doing some type of history of the movement, so okay, so yeah, they draw parallels between the objectification of women and non-human animals, and also that both their oppression is very, like, there's parallels and their subordination. Almost done. Okay. Okay. Quote that the ideologies of domination of women and animals are intimately related, if not identical, is implicitly acknowledged in, for example, Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women from 1792, being immediately parodied by Thomas Taylor's Vindication of the Rights of Brutes, 1792. The point being the latter piece was, quite simply, that arguments for the rights of women can be regarded as absurd when it is seen that the same arguments would lead to rights for animals. End quote. Joke's on you! um, that's interesting. Many of the leaders of the 19th century feminist and suffragette movements were moral vegetarians and anti-vivisectionists. Yeah, also there's a segment about ecofeminism, but we talked about it last time. I'm trying to find the quote. Again, oh yeah, no, it's just me. Okay, quote, the animal rights movement is and must remain distinct from the humane movement. As Regan and Francione have argued, within the welfarist framework, animals are regarded as property, and only humans are rights holders. Within this framework, the interests of humans are given a much more serious weighing. Um, and a presumption in favor of exploitation is created. Thus, the moral framework established by the philosophy of animal welfare guarantees that non human animals will almost always lose when their interests are balanced against the claims of human rights. End quote. Quote, as Regan and Francione have argued, however, there is scant evidence that reforms of the institutions of exploitation will lead to abolition. Instead, reforms may actually prolong the existence of such institutions by making them appear more respectable. And that's a huge point. I mean, end quote, that's a huge point. It helps them. They look better. People feel less guilty exploiting other animals that way. So if you want to learn more about new welfarism and intersectionality in the vegan movement, I would recommend Rain Without Thunder. I read that book. It's from Francione. And I also talked about this. It's way faster if you don't want to read the book. I talked about it in my interview of David C. Arenas on my channel. It's in the playlist collaborations. We're talking about a bunch of stuff that we've talked about today. Yeah, the animal rights movement is unique in the sense that its campaigners aren't its victims and the victims cannot really stand up for themselves in any way. So, yeah. So now I have two little things I would like to say about it before we move into like what you guys thought, and also after that, Guitos. So I really liked this that they picked. Hold on, I need to change my mic real quick. Oh, is it? No, I think I can. No, I'm gonna change it real quick. It was 10% battery. Can you hear me? Let me know, guys. Can you hear me? Because I changed my mic. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I was gonna say I like the image that they use because this is like a victim of experimentation, which is not the food industry for once. So that's good. And obviously from compassion to respect, I really like that. And I really hate a lot that this book actually tends to lump in vegetarians and vegans together as if they are like the same thing. It's really, really bad. Thanks for letting me know, guys. So yes, what do you guys think? Because we're gonna move to Guitos after I want to hear your thoughts about the book, and also if you have anything you'd like to say about my commentary of it, please let me know. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of time. What are your thoughts on the book, and on my commentary as well, if you'd like, if you have any thoughts? I'm just gonna search the Guitos channel real quick. So I presume that, I mean, I think you probably don't have something you'd like to say about it, so I'm just gonna go to Guitos because I don't see any messages about it. So, all right, I'm super glad we read that book because it was very, very good. Thank you so much, Jalen. We are proud of your activism. Thank you so much. So, all right, we're gonna present the channel. We're not gonna necessarily show videos of Guitos. I just want to show you guys what it looks like so that you can subscribe to it. Please go subscribe to them. They're doing great work. Um, Activism towards kids, that's extremely important. So, yes. And yeah, I have a few things I'd like to say about them. Huh, interesting question. Do you believe rights are enforceable without violence? What do you mean without violence? I'm not exactly sure I understand the question. In what context? I really enjoyed David Serena Rocks. Yeah, I agree. He's really cool. Okay, so GuitosKids. Let's go to GuitosKids. So basically, I wrote down some stuff. So I watched two of their most popular videos because you know why not? And then so one of them was 18,000 views, and one of them was 7.4 thousand views, which is great because they're getting a bunch of views. That's really good. Okay, so I think they have some mistakes in messaging that could be easily fixed, but honestly, it's so refreshing to see things like for kids with actual educational purpose to it, and it's just really great to see and great work because it's very needed to have those types of activism channels aimed towards kids for obvious reasons. They are the future and stuff. I know personally, I know for a fact that watching Disney movies where the animals were persons, literally, like they were shown as persons and stuff. They were talking, and you could see their rich internal lives, and really has benefited my relationship to other animals very much. And I think it does a lot of good. So I know that this is very important. Yeah, Carrie says activism to kids is the most important form of activism, in my opinion. I agree. Yeah, yeah. So you said without using force, refusing to participate in a coerced activity isn't violence. You mean in activity? So like you mean like okay, enforcing the rights of other animals without force. I mean, I think there might be some type of war in the future about it. It's possible. Like maybe in the past it's happened. I don't know. Uh, Maybe it will happen. I don't know. But if it does happen and it's the only way and it does work, I mean, it's justified. Just like with the Nazis, it's just I hope that we can. It could be like the feminists. I mean, the feminists were pretty violent actually in the beginning and stuff, but I don't know. And same with those anti-slavery campaigners; they were also violent. It depended. Some of them weren't. Whatever. I don't know. But even if we were to consider that, um, that's not the time for it at all. it's not. We don't have enough popularity at all for that. I think to do anything good, it might backfire at this point. I think it would. Okay, so about Guitos Kids, when when they talk about compassion, have compassion kind of thing, it makes sense because of the context with kids, because it's for kids. I get it. But I would still try to stray away from that term and go towards the fact that it's the minimum we have to do is to just leave them alone, and that using them like objects is just wrong. And yeah, for kids, saying mean or something like it's mean or wrong, whatever. I don't know. I would also stray away from saying caring for them, because it's just about leaving them alone. We're not asking people to actually care for them, like care about them, or just like take care of them. Animals are friends. I get it again because it's for kids, so it's not like the worst, because I get it. Like saying that to adults, I think is really stupid, but saying that to kids, not. But I would just say other animals could be our friends. Not saying they are friends, because it's not like it's about loving animals. Like you have to like other animals or something to leave them alone. It's a weird thing. So, uh, apart from the video in activism, it's a little different. I think when it's said there, whatever. So, vegan is caring. I don't think is the best, because you don't have to care at all. You just leave them alone. And even if it's towards kids, I think we should, even towards kids, it has to be even more perfect, the messaging, because it's higher stakes because of their subconscious and stuff. Like, yeah, you don't have to care about someone not to exploit them or objectify them. I'd say other, this one, yeah, this one is easy to fix. I'd say other animals instead of just animals, because it really does do something to people's subconscious mind. Like, it's like, oh yeah, we are animals too. Like, it does something. Especially to kids who are, well, like sponges for information. Um, I yeah, I really adore the fact that there's a video about how kids can be activists. It's so empowering and so important. Especially me personally, I went vegan, or like I was plant based first because I didn't understand veganism for the longest time, but I went plant based around 14, and this was and I know this is for much younger kids than 14 years old, but it touches me that this is out there, because it's very validating and encouraging for younger people, and like telling them that they're not alone, and just being like kind of a guidance in some sense. Because honestly, when I was like starting out, I had no guidance, no validation, no em- like empowerment. Like, yeah, there was like it was just like people mocking me and making fun of me and stuff. Like, it was just a nightmare. So this is very important for younger people. Um and yeah, and empowering them then to tell them like, yeah, you can do something about it, you can make a difference, is very important, especially for kids that are pretty like the kids are much more powerless than adults, obviously, because they can't control their lives. Like, their parents have a say over everything, basically. So I mean, almost everything. So it depends on whether their parents care about their interests or what they want and stuff, like that they're gonna have what they want. So it's even worse in that sense. Like, they really need to be empowered, and that's in that way. uh and we also know that how traumatic it is to become aware of what's going on for other animals, especially when you're younger. It's even worse because you're not even mentally ready to handle it. So it really is really good that they did that. It's very important. It makes me happy that it got a lot of views. I love that they said every small action can be heard. That's beautiful. It's very good. Very good message. I love it. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what I have. Honestly, it was very refreshing, the messaging and stuff. Of course, it's for kids, so it's kind of like it's very colorful and stuff, and it's for kids. But which is good. It's just not for adults. Yeah, but yeah, go subscribe to them. It's great work. Thank you so much, Renzo, for all the amazing work you do. Kudos, very good, very refreshing, and made me feel happy. um, Yeah, keep it. Yeah, Carrie says kids are very black and white. In my opinion, keep it very simple. I think animals are friends is appropriate for kids. I think you can keep it very simple and very accurate as well. I don't think it should be. I think it should be care. We should be careful about this. Yes. So don't quite agree with that. Yeah. All right, guys. So I have a few things. Okay, so we're going to be voting. So this time, as I said before, it will be psychological books. So if you have anything to suggest, please feel free. I will put on the screen what I have. So I asked in my Instagram story. Um, I asked like for suggestions, and I received 4 suggestions. So thank you so much to everybody who suggested these really cool books. So this is like the 2 first ones. So the first one is Never Split the Difference, negotiating as if your life depend on it. And I think yeah, this guy is got like he did like hostage situations shit like that. The second suggestion is How Minds Change, the surprising science of belief, opinion, and persuasion. And then the third one is Changing Minds, the art and science of changing our own and other people's minds. And the last and fourth one is You Are Not So Smart, why your memory is mostly fiction, why you have too many friends on Facebook, and 46 other ways you are deluding yourself. So these are all relevant to outreach and persuasion and all this stuff. So we are trying to get better. So, okay, guys, first, do you have any things you'd like to suggest as a book? Please, this is your chance. And then we can vote. You can start voting if you'd like. Um, pick one book you'd like for me to read and for us to read and to review in 2 months, because now it's every 2 months. Interesting. Carrie says, I'd like to see something that explains all the different philosophy positions like deontology, utilitarianism, etc. That's great. That's a great idea. Yeah, that would be very helpful. Well, they do that in a lot of books about animal rights philosophies, honestly. So, so Carrie's like 3. We have 2 or 3. Okay, guys, it's voting time. Which one would you like us to read? You don't have to. This is not you committing to reading it. This is me committing to reading it. So you don't have to read it or get it at all. If you want to, of course, that's amazing. But voting time. We have a lot of 2s. Makes sense. Well, that's totally fine, Louis. If you vote for 2, that's totally fine. There's a lot of people here, anyways, so you can vote for 2 if you're split. I understand. They seem very good. Yeah, they're very similar. The 2 and 3. Yeah, they seem very similar. Okay, guys, make sure you vote. Which book for the next 2 months? By the way, I don't have any of those, so I will be getting one. Voting time. Which book? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes so far. Giving you 1 more minute to could you start with 2 and then do 3? I'm not gonna do 2 books in the same life because it's gonna be too long. Um But we could do that again. Like we could, you know what we could do? We could alternate between animal rights and psychology. Um, that could be good. All right, guys. I think we have two more. Like there's more twos than anything. So I think two wins. I think we are reading How Minds Change the Surprising Science of Belief, Opinion, and Persuasion. I am very excited indeed. I think Debug Your Brain recommended this. Yeah, I agree, Carrie. They all look great. I'm happy with any. They all look very interesting to me as well. Oh, awesome. So, guys, I will make a live and soon, and in 2 months, we'll have this one. I'm very excited about this. Awesome. Thank you so much for voting, guys. Very helpful. I'm super excited. This is going to be very good for everybody who does outreach or any type of activism. Honestly, that is going to be just good. All right, great. So I want to say a few things. Hold on a second. Um, I'm just hold on. I gotta find the document real quick. Give me a second. Took a while to find. Oh, I did not even find. Okay. Oh, that's annoying. Oh yeah, I found it. Okay, cool. So I just want to say real quick, thank you to all the amazing Patreon members I have. Zen Animals are here with us, not for us. Zoe, Tidifar Cramps, Ian, MS, Bako, Bruno, Anna, and Nick. It means a lot to me. If you'd like to help me, support me financially a little bit, it's better for me buy me a coffee, which is it's the same thing as Patreon. There's the same memberships and stuff, or like super chats are great too. But personally, I prefer buy me a coffee. It's helpful. But like there's different tiers. There's like $1, $3, and $10, or you can do more if you like. And there's exclusive content stuff like that, and it really does help me because that's my only occupation. But apart from that, yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like be vegan, obviously, get active, educate yourself about activism, veganism, anything that can help you become stronger as an activist is obviously great. um yeah. So thank you so much. I'll see you next month with the quote renting thing. And please, go subscribe to Guitos and um, subscribe to my channel if you'd like to support my content getting pushed a little bit more, and like and comment all that stuff. So I'm gonna go now. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for coming and being open-minded, and I'll see ya.